bottom of the 8th inning. Josh Lowe up there. 1 strike to count to Josh. He sends one into center field. Carlson will go back to the track. That ball's still going, and it's going to be loose at the wall. Extra bases. Here comes Josh around second on his way to third. He is safe all the way to third to open the bottom of the 8th for Josh Lowe. And that's going to be the end of the night for Miles Mikolas. And Yandy Diaz, who is 3 for 3 on the night. And a ground ball up the middle. Base hit into center of the Rays lead. Hit number 4 for Yandy Diaz tonight. Liner into center. There's a base hit. Bronco's going to score. The Rays now lead 4-1. Rosarena's second hit of the night. This one picks up his 66th run batted in.
Well, you wouldn't know it from that highlight right there, the package courtesy of the Rays TV network. But Alex, Miles Mikolas was outstanding last night. Gave you 7 solid innings, ended up giving up 8 hits, 2 earned runs. I guess technically they were his, but there was a decision that took place in the 8th inning.
Stupid rule, right,
I
T-Bone?
heard Tim open up his show today, and he said, I'm not diving into the nitty-gritty of a game that didn't matter last night for the Cardinals. I get it. I don't really want to either, honestly.
They all matter,
But
Tim.
we will.
But the reason that we're going to is because it's a theme. It's a theme that has emerged with Ollie Marmol as the manager. As you guys know, I'm the biggest Ollie Marmol defender on this radio station. But I think he has a blind spot. And that blind spot, Alex, is ground balls. He thinks they're easy outs for hitters, and he thinks they're easy outs for pitchers. So last night, you get into a situation in the 8th inning where in the 7th inning, you had allowed a home run from Miles Mikolas. A hard hit, whatever it is what it is, a 1-1 tie game. Then to open up the 8th, got Miles Mikolas. He allows a triple, leadoff triple.
Should have been caught Carlson.
I wasn't going to say anything. I'm not
I know
mentioning that
you
name.
were going to say it, but I'll
He
say
gave it his all.
That name is redacted for me on this station. I'm not allowed to say him anymore.
He's got to play with a little reckless abandonment. Look a little scared.
Your decision is pretty simple here, right? You either leave Miles Mikolas in for the 9-hole hitter and let him try to get out of that spot because he's been great. He's at 80 pitches. You've got an opportunity to get through this thing with him, and you reward him for what has otherwise been a really impressive game. And again, these games don't matter right now for the Cardinals. You stink. You're done. Season's over. So maybe you give Miles Mikolas the opportunity there. That's fine. You were going to take him out to open up the top of the lineup, whatever the lineup flipped over anyways. So it's basically one batter that you're really talking about there. Then it comes down to a decision of which reliever you go to. The 3 choices are probably Palante, Jojo Romero, or Gio in that spot. They end up going Mikolas out, Palante in. They pinch hit for the 9-hole hitter. You get the ground ball that you were looking for, infield, and you get that first out. Then Diaz comes up to the plate. And now's a situation, Alex, where you got one of the best hitters in all of baseball at the plate, leading off. He's 3 for 3 on the day, going up against Andre Palante. Don't love that spot. I don't love that spot at all.
If only they could have got rid of the 3-pitcher minimum.
I would have walked him in that situation to set up a potential double play ball with a ground ball pitcher on the mound. They decide not to do that, whatever. Here was Ollie Marmol's explanation as to why he took out Mikolas for the 9-hole hitter and went with specifically Andre Palante.
We went back and forth. Obviously, leadoff triple there. He's been on the ground quite a bit. You can not guarantee, but pretty close to guarantee yourself a ground ball, whether they let the catcher hit or they go Ramirez there. You're getting a ground ball with Palante. I'm not going to let him face Diaz for the 4th time. He's 3 for 3 and swinging it pretty good. So made the decision to bring him in then. He got the ground ball, and the next guy, ground ball out the middle.
I know that the majority opinion has been that he should have left Mikolas in. I think it was really a decision of one hitter. Like, if you wanted to leave Mikolas in for the 9-hole, that's fine. I've got no issues with you. I'm not even going to push it back. But he was going to take him out for the leadoff hitter no matter what. And he probably should have. I think that would have been the right call.
Yeah, you just said he was 3 for 3 with good swings on him. Of course you're taking him out there.
So really what we're talking about is which reliever do you go to there? And Alex, I think he's just been way too reliant on the ground ball pitchers in general for all the talk that Ollie has. And he has told it to us on and off the record a million times when we're out of the ballpark. Swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss. You know who he loves more than anybody? Andre Palante.
Man, this is Mike Matheny, Matt Bowman 2.0.
It is wild, dude. Big spot. You need a ground ball. Get yourself some Andre Palante in your life.
This is the part that was so, I don't want to say frustrating, because look, they lost and they did what they needed to do. Got us closer to that #1 overall pick. But if I remember correctly, Ollie talked a lot about that in his intro press conference of, not always using the closer in a closer spot and always going with a certain guy in a big situation to get him out of the jam. Like he was a unconventional manager. Why aren't we seeing that right now? I mean, you've got even JoJo Romero, who's not your closer. Like Gallegos is your closer. High leverage situation. You're about to go up against the 1 and 2 hitters who have done really well against you tonight. Then you say, let's go to Andre Palante. Why is
And
Palante?
Field's in.
Yeah.
So you get the double whammy. I had PTSD last night watching this. I was like, dude, I was at the ballpark. I saw it happen in front of me, developing like this. So against Philadelphia, it's game 1 of the wild card series. Same situation.
Yeah.
We learned nothing.
So is like Palante auditioning for a closer job or something? Like, why is he coming into that spot? I think we know what Andre Palante is.
Yeah, and I'm typically one of those to where, like, if that's not the tying run at third and the tying runner is the one that is batting, then I would be here saying, okay, you don't walk Diaz in that spot because I don't like putting the tying run on base. The tying run's 90 feet away.
It's a third with
I don't
one out.
care. Yeah, I don't care. Set up the double play. I'd much rather face Franco in that situation because he's been less of a hitter than Diaz, not just on the year, but that day in that game. So the whole decision-making process was weird. And look, I get it. I understand that these games don't matter right now, and like we shouldn't be too upset
But
because
Ollie
Alex
thinks
was
they
right.
do.
Well, I know that, but
Ollie's telling Arenado that I can't play this guy because we got to win tonight.
and that's what I'm saying is like I know these games don't matter, and it was the perfect situation for us. I still want to see Ollie Marmol manage to win that baseball game, and last night was just odd decision making from
By the way,
Ollie Marmol.
So when we think ideal scenario for Palante, what's he coming in to face?
5th inning when you're down by 15 runs.
So what specific kinds of batters?
Lefties.
You know what was coming up?
Granted, he has been better against righties, but
Not good. Better, maybe. Not good.
yeah, I didn't say good. I said better.
So
I picked the right adjective.
this year against right-handed hitters, they're
Props to
batting
you for knowing an
342
adjective.
against
Thanks,
him.
man.
342 is the batting average. And batting average does matter in this spot.
You know what that screams?
It
Let's
went
go
up
to
because of
him.
yesterday, okay? Let's calm
Sure,
down.
it was 300 before.
How about Ollie saying he's going back and forth? Who are you going back and forth with, Ollie? Because I feel like somebody's got to
I
tell
think
you
it was
no.
leaving. I think it was either leaving Michaelis in or going to Palante.
Yeah, but what I'm saying
not
is-
even sure that Gio or JoJo were thoughts in his mind.
But what
last
I'm
night.
saying is, who was he going back and forth with? Was it Dusty Blake? Was it Joe McEwing? One of those guys
Listen,
needs
man,
to.
Super
come
Joe
on.
was sleepy last night, so let's
It was
be
an
honest
early
here.
start, man.
So
Yeah.
the guys that are coming up to the plate are 3 straight righties. It just didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Gives me
and it continues a theme of what has gone wrong.
I'm optimistic.
I don't even care anymore about like the micro decisions, what took place. But this is a macro discussion because it's something that's going to come up again next year. And when it happens, we are once again going to lose our mind.
Yeah.
It was the wrong call.
I'm optimistic for next year, 2024. Make it a World Series push when you're bringing in the ground ball pitchers in games like that.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we continue our off-season discussion because this season's over with Dan O'Dowd. He's an analyst for MLB Network. He's a former general manager in Major League Baseball. We'll ask him what his solution would be to the issues that plague the Cardinals next year on 101 ESPN. He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. A lot of our focus on the Cardinals is no longer on the game-to-game any longer. This is pretty new here in St. Louis, but it's mid-August, and we're looking to November here to see what the Cardinals can do to improve the roster for 2024. And with that in the back of our mind, we go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by an analyst from MLB Network. He's the former Rockies general manager. He's Dan O'Dowd joining us here on the show. Dan, we appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
Good, guys. How are you? Good to be on with you guys. I always enjoy coming on with you, Alex and BK. You guys ask good questions, usually a lot harder than I want to answer. So we can go ahead and start.
We appreciate you doing it.
We'll make him a little easier this time then, Dan.
We'll do our best. We will do our best. That's all we can promise. So, Dan, you've been in the spot of a general manager where you look to the offseason, you say, all right, what's our plan? How do we improve this thing from where we're at today to improving it for next year? As you look at the Cardinals right now, the pitching has been the focus here in St. Louis. How do you view the upcoming free agent pitching market?
I think it's thin, but I do think there are some good pitchers. But the Cardinals are going to have to embrace the fact they're probably going to have to go longer in length and pay more in average annual value than they've been comfortable doing in the past. You know, guys, for me with the Cardinals, they have been an enigma for the entire year, starting with some things that happened in spring training and on. So I think the first thing you have to do, and I think Mo and his group are probably doing this, I think you have to assess, you know, was this a really good team that had a really bad year? And then so you don't kind of overreact. I think there's a tendency sometimes when you have a bad season is you overcorrect to the other level and you kind of destroy some of the things you have a really, something you have really good going. Actually, I really like the Cardinals' talent. I mean, I just feel like it's an organization this past year that didn't evaluate their players really well and utilize them and their skill set in the way that they could have been their very best. So I think the first thing to do is to take a step back and say, okay, like, what are our 9 best players on the field or 8 best players on the field? And we're going to play those guys. And then who are our depth pieces after that? And we're going to use them as depth pieces. I felt like they had 5 outfielders, so, like, who is better of the 5? And how do we use Tommy Edman? And what's the best way to use Brendan Donovan? And how do we squeeze Nolan Gorman in? And I just felt like all year long that's what their model looked like. And the year before it was Goldschmidt, Donovan, Edman, Arenado, O'Neill, Carlson, Nootbaar. And they ran those dudes out there and, after they traded Hader, and, like, there was a consistency, and I think they were a really good defensive team. So to improve my pitching, the first thing I want to do is be better at catching the ball like they were 2 years ago. That this year they've been horrendous at catching the ball. And I believe it's because they have had so many players playing so many different positions and no one ever settling in at one position.
Yeah.
So that's a very long answer to a short question.
Well, you're right on to what we've talked about over these last couple of days, Dan, of wondering if the Cardinals are going to be able to kind of clear out some of this minutia of a lot of guys in little positions for them to be starting on an everyday basis. But the one thing John Mozeliak has talked about is changing the model with the pitching side of things, going more swing and miss stuff than contact like they have been over the last 10 or so years. Is it possible, Dan, to overhaul an entire pitching staff in one offseason and change the model?
Yeah, it is. But here's why I struggle with that comment, and I said this on air. When you have a great defensive team, you want guys to pitch to contact. So 2 years ago, they had a really good team. They didn't have a good playoff run there. But darn, I mean, anything can happen once you get into postseason. Sometimes it's not real pretty. Sometimes it is. So 2 years ago, when your model was we got strike throwers, they work quickly, they pitch to contact, we catch the ball well, and then we have shut down bullpen in the back end of the game, that model worked really well. And so that's my point about overcorrecting. So when you design a model now that's going to say we want power arms, we want guys that can swing and miss. Okay, you know what can come with that is walks. Because you get if they find guys that are strike throwers, that are swing and miss guys, guess what? That's going to either cost them more than they want to spend, or there's just such a limited universe of those kind of guys, they're not going to find them. And so I did this a lot in Colorado, and if I could do it again, I would change it. Like I said, God, we need sinker ball guys there because you get the ball up in the air, it's going to leave. I took away 75% of the available pitchers. I just feel like you've got to stay open-minded to really good pitching, but you got to fix your defense first and foremost, no matter who is on the mound.
I think the problem, Dan, is that some of their franchise pillars right now are not good defenders. Like, you look behind the plate, they've got Wilson Contreras. Now, they should have known this when they signed him, but apparently they were surprised to learn what we all knew on the outside, which is he's not a great defensive catcher right now and probably never will be. Nolan Gorman is fine at second base, but he's certainly not what Tommy Edman has been for them. And Jordan Walker, I mean, at least numerically by the numbers, he's been one of the worst defenders in all of baseball this year, and he's the guy that they expect to be starting every day again next season in right field. So you kind of look up the middle at second, at catcher, and at right field. They've got below average at best defenders at all three of those positions. So it's kind of where I wonder, like,
yeah, but
do you need to change?
Here's the point there, though, is they have options. They could run out an elite defensive outfield with Carlson, Newbar, and O'Neill. Simple as that.
What do you do with Walker in that case, Dan?
Then Walker DHs until then you sit down with the development fan with Jordan and say, if you want to stay on the field, here are the areas defensively you have to get better at. Until you do that, you're going to DH. And I think Jordan Walker is going to end up at first base if they don't re-sign Paul Goldschmidt. I think his body has grown to the point where I still think he can be a functional outfielder because I do believe in the kid's athleticism and I love his offensive upside. But I do think in the long run he profiles best at first base. So until that time, I'm going to work my butt off to make him the very best outfielder he can be because of injuries. But if he's not one of my better defenders, he's not going to play in the outfield. If Nolan Gorman doesn't get better at second base, I've got two options with him. I can trade him. I could trade Nolan Arenado in a deal and move him to third, or I could tell him, or I could DH him. So I realize here, guys, something's got to give. But for me, I'm making it a priority. We have to be a really good team defensively, because let me tell you, that part of the game is the only thing that shows up every single night. Base running and defensive play are the only things that show up every single night. So I'm telling my players, the best defenders that are offensively capable of performing at the big league level, they're going to play. And if you want to fall into that category, you got to get better.
It's really interesting, especially on the Jordan Walker. I want to pull on that thread a little bit more, Dan, because in talking with people around the Cardinals, they view it as he needs to play regularly in the outfield in order to improve out there, in order to get those game reps. If you were the general manager here in St. Louis and you were looking at Jordan Walker's future, do you think he can improve to the necessary level without getting those game reps and by being the DH regularly?
No, probably not. And so that's where my daily work comes in. And, the Cardinals will know better than me, guys. When you're around a player every single day, you know what the differential factor is for me, which is always aptitude. Like, you give them a drill work, how quickly do they adjust to it, how proficient they become at it, what's the period of time that allows them to do it in. I don't have any of that information. I'm just saying when I look at that Cardinal team of the future, I see him playing first base. So if they agree with that assessment, all I want to do, and I'm not going to bring Paul back because I think next year is his last year in his contract, and if I decide that I'm not going to re-up him at that age for an extension, well, that's my first baseman of the future, and I'm beginning to prepare him for that, to be ready to take that role. I am preparing all the players I have to look at what is the best team for us to win next year and moving forward. If Jordan Walker is that guy, then Dylan Carlson, O'Neill, or Newbar, one of the three has to go, because all three of them need to play to be the very good best players they can be. You can't make this all work. They try to do that this year, and I think it led to a lot of their problems.
Who would you trade out of those three, Dan, if they do go down the path of Jordan Walker as an outfielder?
Whoever had – I don't think I'd trade Newbar because I do think there's more elite value there. So it would either come down to Dylan or Tyler O'Neill, and that would come down to who are they going to believe they get the most out of. And right now I think both of them are kind of in the same box where I'm not sure that the organization is fully committed to either guy.
Dan, one more thing I'm curious about, and you general managed the Rockies, you had seen the Cardinals, and for a lot of people in St. Louis, they always viewed the Cardinals as that prowess where it come to trade deadline or the offseason where they would make that big move because if they knew there was a glaring hole, they'd go out there and they'd make the move. Do you still see this Cardinals team as that Cardinals team?
I do. I absolutely do. I think the ownership group's one of the best ownership groups in the game. I think their front office has proven the one thing the York Cardinals do as well or better than anybody in the game is they scout players well. They develop players exceptionally well. I think where they failed a little bit is how to harvest the crops at the big league level. And if they're going to learn anything from this year, they need to understand how to utilize their talent even better. But I do think they're going to be aggressive because I do think the nucleus of an entire team is in place. And I could easily see this team with the right decisions this offseason, being a 90-win team again a year from now.
Dan O'Dowd is our guest. He's an analyst for MLB Network. He's the former Rockies general manager as well. Dan, want to kind of go back to the conversation that we began with, which is the free agent pitching market that is available this offseason. We've been talking a lot about it. Nola, Snell, Giolito, Yamamoto, Gray, all these guys that are kind of at the top of the market. If you were in Mo's shoes and the ownership group said, hey, you can get one guy from the top of the market. You can choose who you want it to be, and you've got the budget that is necessary to go get them. Who would you want to target this offseason at the top of that pitching market?
Whoever's going to throw me the most consistent, durable innings. If you're going to spend money on a top of the rotation type starter, you want somebody that's track record to actually give you innings. Under that scenario, that would be – I don't think Giolito is in that category, so that would be Nola for me. I think he'd be a great fit for him. And then they still need to add a guy what I consider to be a solid contributor, which would be that next tier down starting pitcher. And then they've got to see what kind of young pitching they can develop between now and the end of the year. These last 6 weeks are important for me as it relates to the development of some of the young starters in that rotation.
And the final thing that I wanted to get to with you, Dan, if you were in a spot where you could trade for a young starting pitcher and the opposition was asking for Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, are you open to exploring a trade for one of those three?
Yes, absolutely, as long as it's the right young starter. It's it's trying to reacquire the Alcantara and Zach Gallion type young starter to go in my rotation, absolutely.
He's Dan O'Dowd. You can find him on MLB Network. He's the former Rockies general manager. Dan, thanks so much for the time today, man. We really appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
You got it. That's Dan O'Dowd joining us here on 101 ESPN. Really appreciate him spending some time with us today. I think what he said about the defense, Alex, is something that we don't talk enough about, honestly. And the problem is what Heath then said as the follow-up. I don't think this is a very good defensive team. I think
you could take think out of it. It's not a good defensive team.
This is not a very good defensive team. And where I disagree with a lot of the analysis is I don't think it's because of the playing different guys in different spots. I went into this, Alex, yesterday and did a deep dive on some of the fielding Bible numbers. They're advanced. We don't have to get into them. But where the Cardinals had the biggest decline this year in defensive metrics compared to where they were at last year. You know what the biggest spots were where they had a decline? What would you guess are the positions where they had the biggest drop-off from last year to this year defensively?
Center field, right field, and catcher.
I would add third in there because Arenado had early season struggles.
Okay. Third base is the biggest decline from last year to this year.
Yeah, well, in his first 2 months of the season, that was not Nolan Arenado.
Last year, they were plus 27 in defensive runs saved. They saved 27 more runs than average at third base last year. This year, they're a -5. Nolan Arenado has been, by the metrics, a below-average defender at third base. Now, I think he's been excellent lately.
He'll still win a Gold Glove.
But the first 3 months of the season, it was strange watching him play defense at third. And I think he's talked about this since then, where he had some back issues. He wasn't taking the same amount of grounders. It wasn't there for him this year. I don't know if that's something that's going to be sticky, like it's going to continue next year, where there's a little bit of a decline defensively, or if this was a one-off. I don't know. You know what the second worst place is in terms of the drop-off from last year to this year?
Right field?
Nope.
Catcher?
Nope.
First base?
Nope.
Center field?
Nope.
Second base?
Nope.
Shortstop?
Yep.
Oh, man. Almost
Shortstop.
there.
They were amazing defensively at shortstop each of the last 2 seasons, and it was a combination. It was Paul DeJong who was a plus, it was Edmundo Sosa who was a plus, and it was Tommy Edman who was a plus last year. And you go back 2 years ago, plus 15. Last year, plus 14. This year, -2.
But it was Paul DeJong pretty much the entire season.
Exactly. I can't explain it. I can't explain why Paul DeJong...
Well, other than the modern days at shortstop.
He's actually a plus defender, strangely enough.
Wow. Okay.
Paul DeJong and Nolan Arenado were the 2 spots in your lineup this year that had the biggest drop-off defensively from where they were last year to where they are this year. Man, that ain't coaching. That's not guys not being in the same position every day. There's only 2 dudes that were in shortstop and third base the vast majority of the season. I can't explain it. I really can't. So that's a drop-off defensively that is unexplainable. The other 2 spots you mentioned.
Right field, center field.
Right field and catcher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No,
Where was center field on it?
Center field, they went from a +6 last year to actually a +1 this year because of what Tommy Edman's done out there.
Oh, okay.
Tommy Edman has been a significant plus so far this year defensively in center field. Right field, you went from basically average last year to one of the worst teams in all of baseball this year. You were at -3 last year to -10 this year. So the reason why I bring all of that up is because I don't think that you're getting better defensively next year. I think this is your team. Nolan Gorman's going to start every day for you at second base. Despite what Dan O'Dowd just said there, I can say with confidence they are starting Jordan Walker every day in right field next year because they don't want to give up on him defensively. Now, if we get into August and they're in a pennant race and they deem it not worthy of Jordan Walker being out there every day because he hasn't improved from now to next year this time, well, then, yeah, maybe he gets some more opportunities at DH and you go with your best defensive alignment out there. But to start out the season, they're going to keep throwing him out there every day. That means you have to adjust the model, pitching-wise. Because if you're going to build around Contreras and Gorman and Walker, you're not good enough defensively to be the team that you used to be. You're not good enough defensively to use the pitchers that you used to rely upon. We saw it last night, what can happen with Palante on the mound. Wasn't his fault. 2 years ago, those balls probably caught. 2 years ago, those balls probably go into a shift somewhere. Now they can't. So that's why, for me, I do think it's necessary for them to adjust the model. I do disagree a little bit there with Dan O'Dowd.
Yeah, I do too. As much as I appreciate what he was saying of, you might have to shift some things around and mention trading Nolan Gorman if you get to that point where you have to get a pitcher. I appreciate that side of it, but I do disagree because the swing and miss stuff is very crucial. Now, the problem is, does your manager want to use the swing and miss stuff when it's available out of the bullpen? But on the rotation side of things, you need that swing and miss stuff. And specifically when we're talking about an outfield, because, look, it's not going to be Carlson and O'Neill and Nootbaar next year because maybe both of those names are going to be traded in Carlson and O'Neill. So now you're talking of a Edman/Donovan, Nootbaar, and a Walker outfield with Burleson sprinkled in. And that's not a good defensive outfield. You know what you need to do in that sense? You need to get more swing and miss stuff.
Absolutely.
So that the ball is not in the air, so you don't have Carlson running against the wall, so you don't have guys not diving for balls. You need to have the swing and miss stuff. And that's why I look at this and say, look, yeah, you can get more command guys, you can get more pitch to contact guys, and you don't want to isolate that market to only swing and miss stuff. But I'm going to go heavy after the swing and miss stuff first. And if that's not there, then I'll see if I go to that next tier down.
Also, what makes me nervous about a guy like Aaron Nola. And I like Aaron Nola. I think he's a really good pitcher. And I think if he goes somewhere else that has a good defense behind him, he's going to have a really good season next year. But in this specific situation, I do wonder if you're going to see results that are kind of similar to what he's having right now in Philly, because this is not a good defensive unit behind him. It's not. You've got some good defenders individually. Paul Goldschmidt's amazing defensively. Nolan Arenado, despite the weird start to the season, he's a good defender.
Well, your infield's going to be, if Mason Wynn is the guy we're expecting, your infield's going to be damn good next year. It's the outfield that we're concerned about.
I think you're average at second base, but elsewhere you're above average at short, third, and first. You look to the outfield, though, man, they're not just below average. They could potentially be bad defensively in the outfield next year. Like Lars Nootbaar is a below average center fielder, if that's where he plays. Brendan Donovan is a below average left fielder. And Jordan Walker is one of the worst right fielders in all of Major League Baseball. If you're going to have fly ball pitchers,
go Cards.
Like, good luck. Good luck, man. So, yeah, I'm willing to deal with a couple of more walks putting a guy on first, as opposed to having to see Jordan Walker try to track down a ball in right field, and it ends up being a triple. I don't need that. I don't need what we saw last night with Dylan Carl, redacted name, in center field,
man,
trying to track down a ball at the wall. I don't need that,
Do you think we should send T-shirts to all of the outfielders that say below average outfielder?
No, that's just mean.
What? Chafin wears a failed starter shirt.
Yeah, because he's a good reliever.
By the way, it can work.
Good
We saw the Phillies go to the World Series last year.
That's the team I was just going to bring up, is when you look at what the Philadelphia Phillies are, why did they have success last year? One, because their bat smashed, but you know how their best defensive lineup was? It had like they've got Schwarber in the outfield right now. They've got Bryce Harper, who's never played first base. No, that's partly because he's injured.
Castellanos is in the outfield.
Castellanos was in right field for them
like
in the playoffs.
Glover in the playoffs. So it's weird.
Well, you always amp your game up to the next level in the playoffs, so maybe you get the best of them.
But why can they do that? Because they had swing and miss in their rotation. They had a bullpen that had swing and miss to where they could throw guys out there. Juan Soto's a terrible outfielder, but San Diego couldn't get away with him in the outfield. Why? Because they've got swing and miss stuff. That's what the Cardinals need to be looking at, is the swing and miss, because I agree with you guys. I don't think you're like significantly changing this defense next year. In fact, the outfield might even be getting worse next year. You've got to have swing and miss so the ball is not put in play. And even if the infield was above average this year and you didn't have the weird start by Arenado and shortstop was average again.
You can't fix this outfield, dude. You can't. Defensively, it's just going to be bad.
Well, and again, like the pitch to contact doesn't work because there's not the shift there anymore. You cannot position a guy perfect. You cannot position guys perfectly anymore, because how do you do that? You have three guys on one side of the infield.
Really good stuff from Dan O'Dowd. Even if I do disagree with a couple of the things that he said, I mean, it's impossible to disagree with his overall point. His point was basically, Jordan Walker's bad in right field. You got to improve there. I do agree. I think the conclusion, though, on what the information is there, what is the conclusion? His conclusion is put him at DH. My conclusion is put him every day in right field and get better swing and miss stuff. Those are really the two options, though.
The DH thing, though, it makes sense if you are going down the path of Goldie's not going to be back after next year. Like, Goldie's obviously going to play a majority of that, but do you get more DH days for Goldie next year so that Walker can get more reps at first base?
It's something they have to consider. It is. And I think by midseason next year, if Walker is still as bad defensively as he is right now, that's when you're going to see them say, you know what, we can't keep doing this. We have to commit to our best defensive alignment. There will come a point in time when that ends up being the case. At that point, it's just not April. And so you got to come into the season with the swing and miss stuff to, if Jordan Walker ends up staying out there all year long, you can overcome that for your defense. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, is the Blues roster today better than the Blues roster was going into last year? At least one national analyst says, not so much, my friend. We'll tell you who that is next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Rhino Shield. Look, we have gotten a lot of rain over these last few weeks, really last few months. And when it rains, the one thing that you could get a little concerned about is the exterior of your home. Maybe the paint that was on there starts wearing down a little bit. It fades because of all of this moisture, and then you get the heat. Or maybe it just gives you that water damage on the side of the house. I know that that's what was the issue with my house when we first bought it. It had some of that water damage on the left side, on the brick, where it was just that nasty looking color, and it needed a facelift. Now I've used Rhino Shield, and I don't worry when it rains, because the Rhino Shield method is backed by a 25-year transferable warranty, and the product they use, it cures 8 to 10 times thicker than any other paint that you're going to buy over the shelf at a hardware store and think you could just do it yourself, but it's 100% waterproof, so you don't have to worry about that. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. Rhino Shield sets it and forgets it, and they gave my house the facelift that it needed. So give them a call today. Have Darren come out. You'll fall in love with the work that Rhino Shield does. Darren will even help you decide what looks best for your home. 877-25-RHINO. That's 877-25RHINO.com.
Taylor Hendrickson here with the Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals fell to the Tampa Bay Rays yesterday 4-2, and they are back in action tonight. 5:40 will be first pitch as Dakota Hudson's on the mound for St. Louis. It'll be a bullpen game for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. So earlier today, Alex, I was reading a post. This was not from Dom, surprisingly enough.
Wow.
That I looked to and I said, ooh, this is going to get Alex going.
Yeah.
So Greg Wyshynski put together his off-season stock watch.
Shocker, Greg. We didn't get along with him last year.
If one guy doesn't piss me off, the other one will. But I loved Greg. Greg comes on the show and gives us his hot takes.
And his stock watch was very simple. Stock up, stock down. So he went through each team and said, is this team stock up or down relative to what it was last year? And for the Blues, surprisingly enough, he said stock down. Alex, I wanted to ask you, when you look at the roster today, and you compare it to the roster that the Blues had going into last season. So Vladdy's here, O'Reilly's here, Neighbors is in for a big year.
Barbie's here.
Yeah. Do you think this roster is better or worse than the one they went into last season with?
I think if you're going off of names, last year's was better because you had O'Reilly, who was obviously the best defensive player on this team. You had Vladdy, who was coming off an 80-point season. You had Barbashev, who was coming off of a 60-point season. So name recognition coming off the following season, yeah, that team would be better. But here's the thing. All three of those guys, if you look at how they performed last season for the Blues, they underperformed. And if you insert Kevin Hayes' name into the place of Ryan O'Reilly, sure, you lose defensively, but are you better offensively? Kevin Hayes was a better offensive player last year than what Ryan O'Reilly was for the Blues. In Barbashev's sense, enter the name of Kapanen or Verana. Yeah, they were here for partial season last year, but now you've got...
I'm talking about the team that you went into last year with,
right.
So they weren't part of that.
They weren't, and now you've got a full season of them. Also add in Sammy Blais. All three of those guys can combine for what Vladimir Tarasenko was expected to do, and then what Barbashev provided you last year, can Sundqvist provide that for you? A third-line centerman, fourth-line centerman, and you've also got some of these younger players. So, yeah, I would say right now, in terms of expectation, this team offensively is better than last year's offensive team because you've got more offensive upside.
I think you're forgetting about Josh Levo, who started out the season as the first line.
Well, I'm
winger,
also forgetting about Logan Brown, who was supposed to be one of the best 5 moves that Doug Armstrong
All right,
used.
well, that enough proves that they're better this year going into the year than last year.
But again, though, there still is the uncertainty of how does Bolduc look out of camp? How does Dean look out of camp? Like, there are guys that you didn't have. Last year, Neighbors was the X factor. That was it.
Yeah.
Now you've got like 3 other guys who could be X factors on offense.
And that's the thing for me is, unlike going into this year as it was last year, I remember raising some alarm bells last year going, okay, how are they going to replace Perron's production?
You don't have those 30 goals.
Not just in terms of the 30 goals, but the power play. Who the heck's taking that role in the power play? You didn't have a one-timer. And when you saw the power play was bad until they added Verana, and then it got a little bit better midway through the year. And I also remember going to the year, like, you got to plan on regression from Barbashev. Don't think they did that. And you also looked at Neighbors, and Neighbors was a third-line guy that they were basically looking at as potentially filling that hole of David Perron. This year, those X factors that you just brought up, those guys got to earn a job on the fourth line coming into camp. So I do think they are better in terms of what the roster is overall. I'm not sure how significantly better they are because they did nothing defensively, and I think that is something that's such a big negative on this team that is going to drag back some of that offensive success. But I do think they are better going into this year than they were last year.
Let's also look at the off-ice factor into the guys last year compared to the guys this year. There were 3 guys last year that maybe lacked motivation because they did not get the contract extension from the Blues. One guy wanted out in Vladdy. Barbashev didn't have a contract extension, and neither did the captain, O'Reilly. Now you've got Kevin Hayes, who's in a little bit more comfortable situation, but Verana, Kapanen, Blais, Sundqvist, who are all trying to reset the market for themselves on an offensively inclined team. To me, that changes things also.
So, basically, you tell me upgrade, downgrade from where they were at this position last year, right? They're not these. I want to be clear here. These are not all 1-for-1 replacements, but given the spots in the lineup, they're probably as close as you can get 1-to-1, okay? From Logan Brown to Sammy Blay.
Upgrade.
Hey, I'd say stays the same. Upgrade.
Not even close.
This is going to sound weird. Vladimir Tarasenko to Jakub Vrana.
I'd say upgrade.
I think I expect more this year. Like, if you told me...
I expect more motivation out of Vrana.
Prop bet we can make. Who scores more goals in 2023? Vrana or Tarasenko?
I would take Vrana every day of the week because Tarasenko's going to a team to be on the second power play unit, and Vrana will be on your number 1 power play unit.
I'd say Vrana. I think it'll be closer than we think, but I would take Vrana.
He had 4 power play goals in 10 games for the Blues, or in 20 games for the Blues, and that was on the second power play unit.
How many goals did Vladdy end with last year while he was here in St. Louis? Vladdy finished with 10 goals in 38 games. He finished with 18 on the season. Can you get 20-plus goals this year out of Vrana? I would be shocked if you don't. So I would probably say Vrana there.
Remember, you got the speed in that.
Achari to Sonny. I think you downgraded there. I think Achari was a better player than Sonny is, but that is not to suggest that Sonny's a bad player.
Agreed. If Sonny's healthy, I think you could see very similar contributions because he blocks shots, he wins faceoffs, he's a physical player like Achari was. I would give the slight edge to Achari, but if Sonny's 100%, he could be like that.
Yeah, I'd agree with your assessment there. I think if Sonny's completely healthy in the best shape of his life, which he has said, then yeah, I think he can get close to what Achari is.
We'll hear that in the preseason games.
He's already saying
100%.
it.
Yeah, that's true. He is.
O'Reilly to Hayes. I think it's a slight downgrade. If you want me to be total, I think you got worse defensively, better offensively, and when you come out of the wash, I think you have a worse player. That being said, it might be a better fit. Yeah. Sometimes you can have a guy that is not as good of a player, but they are a better fit with what you are trying to accomplish on your respective team, right? Certain ground ball pitchers here in St. Louis this year wouldn't be a good fit. They go somewhere else. They go to Chicago. Like, you go to Chicago in front of that infield, man, you might have a great season there. Like, Marcus Stroman. If you put Marcus Stroman in front of this infield this year, dude, he would get lit up in St. Louis. But in Chicago, he looks awesome because they have one of the best middle infields defensively in all of Major League Baseball. I think that's kind of how Kevin Hayes is right now.
So this is where I'm at on it. I agree in the sense you downgraded only slightly because Kevin Hayes' defense is nowhere near Ryan O'Reilly's defense. Here's where I would look at it as a little bit of a stock rise for Kevin Hayes. Ryan O'Reilly significantly struggled when he didn't have David Perron. Like, Ryan O'Reilly relied on David Perron, and you lost all of his offense. He was a 60-plus point player every season because of David Perron. Kevin Hayes has been playing on an, for lack of a better word, ass team for the last 5 years in the Philadelphia Flyers with John Tortorella up his rear end the entire time. Can Kevin Hayes thrive without a designated winger with him? That's where I would say there's a little bit of a stock rise. Now, I don't know this. Kevin Hayes might just be bad, and we don't know. But if Kevin Hayes can provide you offense like he scored 18 goals last season without having somebody to rely upon, to me, that's a little bit of an upgrade.
And last one here, Barbashev to Kapanen. I think that's a downgrade. Like, I'd be pretty surprised if Kapanen ends up being a better player than Ivan Barbashev.
Man, I don't know. I actually think that would put that one even too because I think Kapanen just...
Damn, dude, you love this team.
I do love what you guys expect. It's almost hockey season. I've been watching this Cardinals team forever.
Points, man.
No, I'm not saying he's going to be...
It is officially time for us to reverse roles.
I'm not saying he's going to score 60 points. Like, that's not going to happen, but... Look at what he did in the short sample size that he was here in a top 9 role, and look at what Barbashev did last year in a top 9 role. Underperformed, whereas Kapanen, he's been a fourth-line player for the Pittsburgh Penguins the last couple of years. If you give him a higher responsibility in terms of penalty kills, second power play unit, can he provide that? I think he can.
I think it's a downgrade, but I think it is kind of closer to what Alex is saying. I think you can see potentially 80% of Barbashev and Kapanen. So, like, I don't think it's a significant downgrade, but I do think it is slight.
How's that Kool-Aid taste, Alex? Like cherry.
You like cherry?
I love cherry, dude.
Really, that's your go-to, huh?
Cherry and what's the red?
Hawaiian Punch.
No, but it's in a blue package. Tropical Punch, I think it's what it's called.
Hawaiian Punch is the way to go.
I love me some red Kool-Aid.
Cherry.
Oh, dude, I love cherry.
That would be like my last pick. Like, if we were doing a draft right now, I would say I'm going to leave that for you.
Well, if we were doing a draft, I'd say I'm leaving you for you.
Coming up next,
I don't know what that means.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. Do you remember that childhood piggy bank that you had, the satisfaction that you felt when you were finally able to reap all of those rewards from your diligent savings? Well, with Truehold, you can access your biggest piggy bank yet. Yeah, I'm talking about your home's equity. You'll start enjoying the retirement that you plan for right now, and you don't even have to move. Here's how you do it. Truehold will buy your home for its best current value, and you get to bank all the cash now while you continue living in your home for as long as you'd like. Truehold will cover all the property taxes, insurance, the repairs, and the maintenance too. That's all off your plate. And since Truehold will pay your home's current value in cash, you can do whatever you would like with that money. So start enjoying your home's equity while it's still high by visiting Truehold.com, and you'll discover how much they'll buy your home for today based on its best current value. Call 1-855-300-9993, or you can just visit Truehold.com to find the smarter and faster way to cash out on your home's full value without having to move. That's 1-855-300-9993, or visit them at Truehold.com. From Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. From the 314, guys, the way the BK just did player-by-player comparison from the Blues last season to this season, it seems to me that this team is probably at most the 7th best team in the Western Conference. Where would you place them in your power rankings of Western Conference teams?
7th or 8th. I think there's a battle for 7 and 8 between Seattle, St. Louis, Calgary, and Winnipeg. And 2 of those 4 are going to be 7 and 8. The other 2 are going to be 9, 10. I think it's very clear who 1 through 6 is and very clear who the bottom 5 are. And then it's just a battle of the in-between. And I think that's good for the Blues to be 7 or 8th compared to being worse than what you were last year.
I would say 7th or 8th if things go right for them, because I think it takes one bad thing to happen for the Blues, and this team will be fragile and they can fall apart easily. And I don't mean fragile in terms of like the players will quit. I mean like they are built on like, hey, we've got to outscore our problems. So if we lose one key offensive player, or Vrana doesn't live up to his potential, or Hayes doesn't hit, their defense doesn't take a step forward. Like I can see where this team is 7th or 8th best, and they get in the playoffs and you go, hey, maybe they could make somewhat of a run. Or I could see it just being such a disaster they're sellers again at the trade deadline.
Yeah, by no means do I think this team's making any deep run this year. I think this team could get into the playoffs and could steal a series, but that's it.
Like, I think they're a 500 team that can, things go right, finish 5 games above. Things go wrong, could be 5 to 10 below.
And all that's defense.
It's got some White Sox vibes to it. Not in terms of, like, the culture issues.
Well, they had that last year. Let's hope it's not this year. Nobody was sleeping in their locker room, though.
The White Sox were a team that you could see how it would work. You did. You looked at the talent and you're like, all right, so they got swing and miss stuff in their rotation. They've got some arms that I'm familiar with in their bullpen, and they've got position players that came with crazy high pedigree. And they just, for whatever reason, didn't work out. Not great defensively. Obviously, they've had some clubhouse issues that are being kind of aired out in the open now. So it's got some similarities there to what the floor is, where it could go horribly wrong. And next year, we're talking about like blowing it up in a way that we're not right now. I think they're probably going to be kind of similar to what they were last year, honestly, in terms of like the overall results. Somewhere around 500. I think this season will end with more optimism than last year did, because you will be able to see some of the guys taking a step. You'll see more of, okay, this is what the future looks like. Here's what they need. Here's what they have. I've got a clearer image of what this looks like 2 years from now when they really are competing again. I think that's what 2023 is about for them. Whereas last year was like, this is the end of an era, and it feels sad for all of us to be moving on from the core of what was a Stanley Cup contender. So I think the vibes will be a lot different this year. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Guys, how much different do you think the Cardinals would look right now if they had a manager like Joe Maddon?
None. I think they'd still be the same team.
It looked like they were having a lot more fun, though.
No, they wouldn't.
And Madden would be going to a ground ball pitcher.
I mean, maybe Madden's not playing Taylor Motter as much, but that's more the roster.
Lante's not coming into the game last night like he did.
Yes, he is.
He may have actually gone swing and miss.
Maybe, but he's not using his closer in the 8th inning.
No, but he might use JoJo.
Would have been used there.
Maybe.
Matt,
come on, man.
And by the way, you just said old school. Joe Madden, he's making up BS on MLB Network that he's old school. That dude was the king of analytics.
Until it was no
Kiss
longer.
my you know what, man. You are not old school.
Whoa.
Joe Maddon is a really good politician. I will give him credit for this. Joe Maddon sees where the winds are going at any given time. Like, it was cool. It was super cool to be like, not a numbers nerd, but the guy that is on the cutting edge of all of these decision-making stuffs in like 2011. That was cool. It's like, damn, you see that guy that's down in Tampa? He's doing it a little differently, and look at all the success he's having. And then he goes to Chicago, and he's got the goats. He's got the petting zoo that's out there. He's got all of the... He had all the players wearing like different costumes as they were going on road trips. Like, damn, that team's just having so much fun. Look at quirky old Joe Maddon over there with his Cubs. And then he went to the LA Angels and became this like old school manager suddenly, because he was living in like the Mike Scioscia era of the Angels. And he had Mike Trout and Albert Pujols. And then it became, this is a disaster. What has gone wrong for him? Why is this organization such a failure?
Trout came to work. Is like, why the hell is there a petting zoo right now?
And he has become this like old school manager that now goes on MLB Network and criticizes everybody else for what they're doing. it has been quite the evolution for Joe Madden over the last 15 years.
Now, let's take Joe Madden's name out of this.
By the way, I think very little changes. I think the public perception may change because you feel differently about the guy that's speaking every day, but the actual results I don't think change hardly at all.
Bruce Bochy instead of Holly Marmol.
Nothing changes.
Again, I think you have a player problem right now. I think it's the same as what we said with the Blues last season. You look at this defense. How does it get fixed? Personnel. Get better personnel out there. How do you fix the right field defense? You don't play Jordan Walker. How do you fix the issue that you have at third base? Well, I don't know. I don't think you fix that. I think you just wait until Nolan Arenado remembers that he's Nolan Arenado, which he has over the last month. How do you fix the defense at catcher?
Well,
trade for Sean
Joe
Murphy.
Madden had the catcher that you have, and he was still bad defensively.
Not this bad.
He was.
No, not this bad.
He's actually been better this year defensively by all of the metrics.
So look, he's improved.
hey, we know not to trust defensive metrics.
I tend to agree with you, but when they are so when you're in the middle of things, whatever.
AKA if it works for his
Carlson versus
argument.
Edmund, they're both pretty solid in center field.
Redacted.
Sorry. The one guy that they're playing right now in center field versus Edmund, they're kind of similar defensively.
If Mike Schilt was here, they'd still be scratching and clawing
By
his
the
way
way,
to the top.
I don't think the public perception would change no matter who the manager is. Because though everybody loves Mike Schilt right now, man, everybody wanted that guy fired when they were here and struggling. Everybody hated the scratching and clawing. You would find something to hate about Joe Madden if you were here and they were failing. You'd find something to hate about Bruce Bochy
I think
if you were
more
here and
people
failing.
would be willing to admit it's a player problem if the manager had name recognition behind
Actually, I
it.
think that's true.
I think when it's a no-name manager, it's easy to go to him and say, well, that guy's got no experience at the major leagues.
I don't think it would be because I think that's what happened with the Blues. Like, Berube had won a cup, and 3 years ago? And everybody didn't go, I know, but that's what I'm saying is, he became a name that was, you win a championship, your name is etched on the cup forever, and you become a name that everybody associates as he's a winning coach.
Can I make one other point about...
So, hold on. So you're saying that people actually... Hold on, man. He's getting into the Blues right now. Let me freaking cook.
But here's what I'm saying.
Alex said, I'm going to let you finish.
Because there's a group of people that think Berube should be fired, and those people are dumb.
Well, no, but here's what I'm saying. You said that if it was a manager with a pedigree, people would look at the players. Berube's a coach with a Stanley Cup pedigree now, and people didn't point at the Blues and go, that's a player problem.
Well, yeah, they did.
No,
they pointed at Vladimir Tarasenko and said, this guy needs to get out of here.
They did after he got traded. Why? Because everybody in the media
and they pointed at Doug Armstrong
went,
and said, this guy's jacked up the team.
Vladdy Armstrong.
People that point, this is a high noon duel right here. The people that...
It's 12:04. Your time check brought to you by Clarkson.
There we go. The people that blame Berube are the same people that...
blame Ollie Marmol?
No, I need to stop before I get fired.
You're saying what I'm saying. As I don't think it changes the perception if it's a older manager. I think people blame Berube and Berube's an established coach.
One quick thing here. I think it changes because Berube's track record is very slim. Berube's track record was built on one team. I think what people would say about Bochy is this is a guy that has a championship pedigree for 20 years. And because he has that, it is very clear to them that it's the roster that's the problem. Whereas with Berube, I think...
Someone told me to squirt myself on that, and I frankly should have.
Clip that, T-Bone. I think that what people would say about Berube is he was made by a team that was so overwhelmingly great that he came in, fixed it in half of a season, and then he was living off of his laurels of that team. I disagree with that assessment, but I think that's the difference between a guy like Berube and a guy like TLR or
I just think here in St. Louis, if the manager doesn't win, it's his fault.
Yeah, but see, I think there's a small portion that blame Berube and more people blame Armstrong. I think there's a small portion that blame Marmol and a lot of people that blame John Mozeliak, but I think it goes to the manager before the players.
Can I say my piece now?
No, I'm going to let you finish. We got to hit a break, right?
We got to go to break, yeah. Coming up next.
One thing that bothers me about the criticism for Ollie is a lot of people bring up the defense and how they lacked fundamentals and how that's a spring training problem. Can we talk about who actually puts together the spring training plan? Are we allowed to do that? Because this defense was really good when Ollie was the one that was putting together the spring training plan.
You about to blame Joe McEwing?
The bench coach's job. Just going to leave that there. Coming up next, last night was exactly what we needed to see in order to be out on Tyler O'Neill. Do not let me get back in. We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
We hired the wrong company to remodel our...
This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Didn't feel comfortable playing today, so we scratched him, and Burleson ended up DH and Nuke going to left.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. That was Ollie Marmol yesterday talking about Tyler O'Neill. I'm glad this happened, Alex. Not because I don't want Tyler O'Neill to be healthy, but because it served as a great reminder for myself. And I can only speak for me.
This is like when your girlfriend cheats on you the second time and you walk in on it and you're like, oh, I'm glad this happened.
Exactly.
I'm so happy that this happened to me.
I needed this for closure.
Let me go cry in the corner.
I'm not even mad anymore. It's not about...
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah. I have had a clean break now with Tyler O'Neill. I needed a moment
I feel like
of
the best
clarity.
friend that's been like, dude, you got to get out of this relationship.
Yes, you have. You guys have both been telling me.
No, I've been the one to be like, nah, stick with it. It's fine.
It is an
We'll get there.
emotionally reckless decision for me to get back into this relationship with Tyler O'Neill. Now, this guy, man, the nights out are great.
Big, strong dude.
I mean, great.
The nights in are even better, am I right?
He shows you a good time. Man, he takes you on vacation.
Shows you his futon.
We traveled all across Europe backpacking together.
Wow.
But then
That's
he
why
would
his back
disappear
hurts.
for a month. No callbacks. Nothing. Nothing there. And you wonder what's going on. And you're thinking to yourself, maybe there's another woman.
You're just the booty call.
I'm just the side piece.
Unbelievable.
But you go back every time because when you're together, everything is so good.
All right,
But
now
then you
I'm
walked in on him with another person.
Can we just
and
talk about Tyler O'Neill?
This analogy is getting too
Yeah.
real.
For the fourth
my
straight
headphones off.
day, you have finally convinced yourself
Fourth straight day?
it's time to end this thing, man. We're over. It's not going to get better. A cheater is a cheater is a cheater. And Tyler O'Neill's a cheater, man.
Are we talking about his baseball or his personal life? Where are we at right now?
All right, sorry. Let's get back to the baseball side of things. You can't trust him. You cannot trust this dude, man. He was on a firm schedule of playing no more than 5 days in a week and no more than 2 straight games. This guy was not going to play down the stretch 3 straight games at any point in time. You're coming off of an off day. He's done batting practice. He's gone out and played in the outfield. I was listening to Derek Gould on the radio yesterday. He was on the radio as Tyler O'Neill made a circus grab in left field. And 5 minutes later, it was announced that he was scratched from the game.
No wonder why he got hurt.
Well, why are we making circus grabs in the field in BP? Huh, Tyler?
Guys, last year.
You know you're fragile.
This is one of my favorite cuts from Ollie Marmol. We asked him right as it was announced that Nolan Arenado was going to be an all-star, what it is about Nolan Arenado that allows him to be a perennial all-star and why it is that he continues to bet on him year in and year out. Here's what Ollie Marmol had to say. Think about Tyler O'Neill as you're listening to this cut.
Even when things weren't going his way, he stayed with it. I mean, I just announced it to the club. This is a guy that regardless if his body hurts, feels like crap, it didn't matter, he's going to take the field. And I mean, for me, that's the difference between an all-star and someone that just, I'm going to play when I feel good. Anybody can play when they feel good. It's when you don't feel good, when your lower back's on fire and you can barely get out of bed, but you find a way to still play third every day. Yeah, tip my cap to that.
All right, Alex.
Yeah,
now let's go back again.
Shot.
Let's re-listen to what Ollie Marmol had to say after the game yesterday on his latest update with Tyler O'Neill.
He didn't feel comfortable playing today, so we scratched him, and Burleson ended up DH and Nuke going to left.
Didn't feel comfortable playing today, so we scratched him.
He didn't feel comfortable playing today, so we scratched him. And
no conversation. You just walked in and said, hey, Skip, I'm not feeling well, man. I made a dive for a ball. Tyler, you're scratched.
I'm done.
Good conversation.
I am out. There is nothing that he can do the rest of this way to hurt me anymore. I am completely washing my hands of the situation. Tyler O'Neill doesn't even factor into my 2024 conversations anymore. And he shouldn't factor into the Cardinals. I don't care if you get a high A-ball pitcher for him. I don't care if you get a reliever for him. Dude, you have to be done with this experiment. It has not worked. And yesterday, for me, that was my breaking point. He said that he's going to be back in the lineup today. Listen, man, I'm not telling you that you got to play injured. But in this game, in this league, if you're going to be an all-star caliber player, you got to play hurt. That's how it works, dude. Brendan Donovan was hitting every day while his arm was falling off. It was one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. Nolan Arenado, the entire first half of the season, his back was on fire every single day that he went out there. Nolan Gorman refused to go on the injured list despite having to miss multiple games because of a back issue. Man, I'm sorry. I'm not doing this anymore. Not next year. You can't trust him. And this outfield is so crowded. Tyler O'Neill has made the decision very easy for me. That is the first guy I'm removing from the equation. So that way I don't have to go through this again in 2024.
Yeah, the problem is I don't think the Cardinals view it the same way. I think the Cardinals are viewing Dylan Carlson that way, where it's like, look, we're done. It's just not working. You can't be there. So we're going to ship out Dylan Carlson in the offseason. They're looking at Tyler O'Neill of the upside of what he did a couple of years ago and saying, well, let's just keep it because we already play with him injured, so we'll stick with it, and we're not going to get the return value for Tyler O'Neill. I'm with you in the sense of being done with Tyler O'Neill. I was when he was out for 2 months, and it's like, okay, we're pretty much over this. But the problem is the Cardinals won't be, and so I think we're going to be stuck with Tyler O'Neill for another year of them trying to get Tyler O'Neill back. But the bigger issue with all of this isn't Tyler O'Neill's unavailability. It's the fact that the manager knows that the player is not good enough for this team.
And the problem is that the manager knows the player is good enough for the team.
But it's not available.
Exactly.
The manager's frustrated. So if you got a guy on your team that the manager's frustrated with, but you're supposed to play him, that's not a good recipe for success. You got to get guys that the manager actually appreciates. And it sure doesn't sound like, look, I'm sure Ollie loves the idea of Tyler O'Neill and wants Tyler O'Neill, but you got to imagine this guy's getting frustrated with the fact that Tyler O'Neill is just never available for us.
Well, Ollie says at the ballpark, he can be like the best player on the team because of all his skill
We
set.
saw it when he returned.
Yeah, so
I mean, 2 years ago, he was literally one of the three best players in all of Major League Baseball.
That's how BK allowed her to go back out on another date with someone else.
Yeah, because, man, I was so enticed. The sex appeal was there. Like, you watch this guy in the outfield,
And she said, honey, I need to go out with a friend. He's like, go for it.
Dude, there are nights where I just need a cigarette and a sandwich after watching this guy in left field because it is so impressive. Like,
it's bad for you, man.
The defense that he plays in left field is sensual. It's there. He's got everything you could ask for until you ask him to do a little bit when he's hurt. If you try to get him to play through not an injury. These guys should not play through injury, and I'm not asking them to. But there are guys that have to play hurt. You're going to not feel great every day, man. Alex is sleep deprived half the time that he comes onto this show. Guess what? He figures it out. He fights through it. He comes on here and he gives you guys his best every single day. He's not out here just calling into work, hey, I'm tired. My baby was up until 6 a.m. last night and I got 1 hour of sleep. No, he's going to figure it out. He's going to battle through. Tyler O'Neill, what are we doing, dude? What are we doing? Why can't you battle through for one game against the Tampa Bay Rays when your team needs you, man?
And this was the whole thing that I said. I think we talked about this last week. But, again, we were talking about Carlson at the time because the Cardinals basically said, hey, we're not trading O'Neill because his value is too low. There may come a time this offseason they have to just do that. And I think it's going to come with O'Neill, and I think it's going to come with Carlson. Now, look, O'Neill may continue the days when his knee doesn't hurt, that he may continue to play well.
I hope he hits 350 the rest of the way.
And if he does, and
35 home runs.
And if he does, they could still potentially sell him at a pretty high price. But if he doesn't and he goes cold and the injuries continue to be a thing for Tyler O'Neill, they should still consider selling low. They should sell low on him. They should sell low on Carlson. It is time to clear yourself from those two and figure out the plan moving forward without both of them.
I let myself fall for it.
Sorry, buddy.
Plus
you guys,
450 for a home run, and I don't know Neil.
No.
He's not playing, so.
If you guys hear me start to waver again based on the talent that we see on display over the next month and a half on Tyler O'Neill, slap me in the face. Yeah. I'm serious. Smack me. Because I don't.
You might like that, so I'm not doing that.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line.
That's the way to end it.
You give us two scenarios, tell you which one's more likely to happen here on 101 ESPN.
My fingers hurt.
Oh, well, now your back's gonna hurt because you just pulled landscaping duty.
It's time for a DraftKings at Casino Queen Redbird report with Cardinals TV broadcaster Brad Thompson.
Heartbreak 101. That's how Miles Michaelis described it after a 4-2 defeat by the Rays in St. Pete.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. Boys, I'm going to start with this one. More likely to open the season as a starting outfielder for the Cardinals next year. Tommy Edman or Tyler O'Neill?
Tyler O'Neill. Just because I think they're going to stick with it because they're not going to get the return they want. And I don't know if they view Tommy Edman as an outfielder anymore. I think they're going to view Tommy Edman as a shortstop, backup shortstop / utility bat / defensive player everywhere. So I'm going to say Tyler O'Neill. I don't think it's the right decision, but I think they're going to go with it.
I think I'm going to say more likely Tommy Edman. I think they learned the lesson on O'Neill and potentially sell low on him in the offseason. And even if he's still here, there's a chance he's hurt. So I like my odds better with Tommy Edman. So I'll say more likely Edman.
I think it's more likely they end up with Tyler O'Neill in the outfield. And that makes me sick. Because they should be ready to move on.
You'll fall for it again, buddy.
I'm not going to.
You'll fall for it.
Not allowing myself this time. I don't think that they're going to have Tommy Edman as their starting center fielder. When we talked to Gersh, and he didn't even mention him as one of the options in center field before we brought him up specifically, I think they're going to go into next year with Lars Nootbaar as their starting center fielder, and they're going to say, this is fine. Victor Scott is coming. Kind of similar to what they did this year at shortstop, where they said, you know what, we're going to get one more year, and it ended up being the right decision, honestly. One more year out of DeYoung and Edman, and then we're going to hand things over in 24 to Mason Wynn. Clearly, that was the right plan because they didn't lock themselves into a long-term contract to one of the shortstops that fell, no pun intended, short this year offensively. And now you've got Mason Wynn coming. I think the same will be true in center field. Victor Scott will eventually be the defensive guy that they're looking for. Ton of speed, 70-plus stolen bases this year down in the minors. But for the foreseeable future, it'll be Lars Nootbaar.
And I can see them signing some veteran to a minimum to be a backup outfielder and come in and start at center field for him.
T-Bone's got the name for you.
Yeah, Kevin Pillar.
Okay, well, no, not that one.
I mean, they're all the same.
I mean, he's only going to make like $3 million, and he's good defensively. Yeah. He's perfect.
They're going to do that.
And he actually hits lefties fairly well.
Oh, well, good. Bring him in.
Cool. $3 million Dylan Carlson, who you don't care about on the bench.
Redacted.
I'm not even saying that's a bad thing. That's a good thing. If you've got a guy that can hit against a certain handedness and is totally fine with being a bench bat for you, great. You need those guys. Alex?
All right, let's try the one that I tried yesterday and then realized we weren't playing more likely to happen. More likely to happen, the Cardinals miss out on a top-tier starting pitcher, or the Blues decide to trade one of the defensemen at the trade deadline this year.
Ooh, at the deadline.
This means that they actually pull off the trade at the deadline.
Cardinals miss out on all of the top
Cardinals miss out on the
agents?
top-tier starting pitcher free agents, or the Blues trade a defenseman at the deadline.
Are we including like Scandella? Because like I can
Any
see
of
them
the
moving
defensemen.
All right.
the
I'm
defensemen.
going Blues. Yeah, I can see them.
that out.
I could see them moving Scandella at the deadline. I think if they're bad or they're like middle of the pack, I could see them moving Veronica Kapanen, and I think Scandella will have a market. Heck, Bortuzzo could have a market because he's good on the PK. Sure. So I think it's more likely the Blues make a trade.
Hey.
Yeah, I think there's a chance he's dealt to Camp, but I'd say more likely Blues. In fact, I'd say 100% Blues.
I agree.
I agree too.
T-Bone?
More likely to be the Cardinals starting first baseman in 2025. Jordan Walker or Paul Goldschmidt?
Paul Goldschmidt.
Paul Goldschmidt.
This team believes
You realize
in
I said
legacy.
25, right?
I do.
Okay.
This team believes in legacy.
Oh, you did? Paul Goldschmidt.
And Paul Goldschmidt has become a legacy player here in St. Louis. You agree with it or not, doesn't matter.
He's already got a red jacket.
This team just paid $17 million in the year of our Lord 2023 for Adam Wainwright.
Lesson learned.
Okay.
Okay.
Lesson learned after...
Also did it with Yachty.
Yeah. Yachty and Carpenter and Waino and Goldie, and eventually it'll be somebody else.
I think they did it with Johnny Peralta also.
No.
No.
Maybe Brandon Moss.
I think you guys
Goldie's going to be your first baseman until he retires.
I think you guys are right, and I'm thinking it could be the wrong decision for the St. Louis
I think he's getting an extension next spring. I wouldn't do it, but I think they will. He'll be the guy that they put out the chairs, outdoors where the wind is just gusting a million miles an hour.
Like what Mo did for his contract extension.
They're gonna do. Remember when Albert signed and you couldn't hear anything they were saying? It was just. That's what'll happen.
I don't remember that.
I don't remember that either, man.
Oh, really?
I don't remember that noise you just made.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line.
Beatboxing.
For more likely to happen. Guys, more likely to make the Super Bowl this year, the Ravens or the Jaguars? That's a fun one. I think I would go the Ravens.
I think I would go the Jaguars. I think all that needs to happen to the Ravens is OBJ gets hurt, and then they're done.
I think they've got options at receiver this year for the first time in like Lamar's entire career.
I think Jacksonville's got more of a complete team.
Whose defense do you think's better?
The Ravens.
Jacksonville.
I think Ravens too.
Yeah. I think the Ravens defense has a chance to be like top 5 in the NFL this year.
And that's why I lean Ravens, because I think offensively they could be similar. I think you're right, though. I think the Baltimore's a little bit more fragile if someone gets hurt or gets something goes wrong compared to Jacksonville, who's got all those weapons. But I think their defense is going to be better than Jacksonville, so I would probably lean Baltimore too.
Yeah, mine's just Jacksonville. I like the coach. I like the. I think they have a deeper roster, and I actually am pretty optimistic about that defense from what they did last year.
I'm not as high on Doug Peterson. I know he had a great year last year, but I remember
I'm high on Doug Peterson with Trevor
in
Lawrence. I think he has a good quarterback to work with.
Doug Peterson also won a Super Bowl in Philly.
Yeah, I know, but
but T-Bone already made it clear championships don't matter in the past.
Yeah, it was just 1 year.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
You made that clear, not
did.
me.
You washed up.
More likely to win 8 games this year, Mizzou or Illinois? T-Bone, let's start with you. What's your confidence level right now in your fighting Illini?
I mean, I'm expecting 8 wins.
Are you really?
I am expecting a step back, though.
Are you expecting 8?
I'm hoping 8. Yeah. I don't know. I guess hoping it would be.
Do you think they're going to beat KU?
Yeah. I think they beat Kansas.
You didn't sound too confident there.
Yeah, you could feel.
Yeah, he's like, yeah. I think they're going to beat Kansas.
The problem for them is I just don't know what to expect what they're getting out of quarterback, which is like what you can say every year.
Yeah. I think they'll beat KU.
I think they've got good weapons on offense. Defense, they are going to take a step back, and that's my concern. Is
Chase Brown's coming back, right?
What? Chase Brown? No.
Why not?
He's playing for. I don't remember who he got drafted by.
That guy.
I think he's
Cincinnati.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, I think they'll be okay in the running game. It won't be as good as last year, of course. I think offensively they'll be okay. The problem is I think the defense takes such a significant step back.
The answer is Mizzou.
Yeah, the answer is MIZ.
I'm going to say Mizzou, but I don't have confidence in them doing it either.
You said you expect Illinois to win 8 games this year.
I'm
Say
hoping for
dude.
8 games. I think they take a step back. I don't think Mizzou gets 8 wins either, but I think it's more likely that they get there because I've been told their defense is good.
More likely
I don't trust
Illinois beats Kansas
man.
or Mizzou beats K-State.
I think Illinois over Kansas.
I think Mizzou over K-State.
I said Mizzou over
I don't
K-State.
think Illinois is beating Kansas. I
don't think Missouri's beating Kansas State.
I don't either, but
I saw what happened last year.
Yeah, I think both of these teams are going to lose.
K-State lost a lot of talent from that defense. Dude, K-State had a ton of guys get drafted last year, including the Chiefs' first round pick.
I go with Mizzou because Eli has recognized that he's not the OC. Somebody else is the OC.
I have so little faith in Eli, it's not even funny.
It takes guts to do that, Tanner.
Our text line's all over the place on this one. From the 618, Illinois is going to be very good again in 2023. T-Bone, ILL, at least 8 for the Illini. And then from the 636, Mizzou won't even get 6 wins this season. If they don't get to 6, Eli's getting fired.
Eli should be fired if they don't get to 6.
I think they will, though. Like, you've got South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Memphis, Vanderbilt. That's 4 automatic wins. Florida's going to be bad this year. That should be 5. You have to win literally one other toss-up game in order to get to your 6 wins this year. If Mizzou doesn't get to 6, it's a disaster of a season, or they've just had, like, crushing injuries that nobody was going to be able to overcome. They're winning 7 games plus this year. Mark it down.
I'm in. MIZ!
Z-O-U!
Suck on it, T-Bone.
Coming up next.
We'll see.
Tanner is the most risk-averse person I've ever met. But when it comes to starting pitching, he is ready to take the plunge. He'll explain why coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with the Sports Center update, driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals lost to the Rays yesterday 4-2, and they'll be back in action tonight. 5:40 will be first pitch as Dakota Hudson gets the start for St. Louis. It'll be a bullpen game for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your roadshow 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
I understand not taking on an unnecessary risk, but at some point you do have to roll the dice again. You do have to get back out there. Okay, the Rays picked your pocket for Randy Arozarena. It happens.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting for every Arizona Diamondback and Colorado Rockies to fall asleep and get hammered and forget where they are, and then trade you Goldie or Arenado when they're desperate for just getting something, you're going to be waiting a while. What bad team right now has something you want? There's not another Arenado and Goldschmidt out there.
That was Anthony Stalter yesterday on the Fast Lane saying it's time for the Cardinals to have the guts to make the big trade that they've been missing. Alex, I think there's some truth to that. I think if your opinion is the Cardinals need to go into this offseason and get aggressive, whether that's in the free agent market for starting pitching, giving years and money that they've been unwilling to in previous seasons, or they need to go out there and be willing to trade a big-time player the way that they really have. When was the last time they traded away like a big piece from their current major league club? Can you guys remember?
Oh, from their current club?
Yeah, not a prospect. I'm not talking about like trading Sandy Alcantara or anything like that. Like a current big-time piece. Was it like Colby Rasmus?
Probably.
Alan Craig, but that was more injury-related. That would be like trading Tyler O'Neill right now.
Who'd they have to trade for Jason Hayward? Were those prospects?
Who did? That was Shelby Miller. So maybe that was the one where you're like giving up, you're selling high.
Luke Weaver. What? He was in your rotation, man. Marco Gonzalez.
Yeah, those were all before.
Austin Gomber.
Shelby Miller's probably the most recent example of this.
Randy Arozarena.
And Shelby Miller was like, there was some stuff there as to why the Cardinals were out on him, as we later saw. They need to do something they haven't really done in a decade if they're going to go out there and make the big move that we're looking for on the trade market. Alex, I'm getting more squeamish by the day. Because as I look around Major League Baseball and I'm watching all of these teams that are just craving starting pitching, and you look at all the teams that are hemorrhaging pitching when it comes to the injuries, I think to myself, man, do I really want to trade an everyday player for one of these guys that is so unbelievably fragile that at a moment's notice, it can all break? And my answer is, I don't know. Man, Tampa Bay, the team that you're going up against right now that came into the season with McClanahan, Springs, Rasmussen, Baz, Glasnow. Man, that is a good rotation right there that I just mentioned. Every single one of them is on the IL. And they might, 4 of them, be out for the rest of the season. McClanahan is now out, forearm issue. Might have to get Tommy John. Springs out, Tommy John. Rasmussen out, elbow. Baz out, Tommy John. Glasnow was scratched from his last start, missed the entirety of the 2022 season, Tommy John.
Oh, go trade for him, Cards.
Brian Wu, guy that we talked a decent amount about. Did you see this news from yesterday, Alex? He's going on the IL. You know why? Forearm strain. It happens to everybody, dude. It's coming for you. Whether you have it now or the boogeyman's coming 3 years from now, at some point, you can count on it. That starter that you get is probably going to be missing a season. So the reason why I get squeamish about doing something like this, I'm pretty sure Nolan Gorman's playing 130 games next year, barring something unforeseen. I'm pretty sure Lars Nootbaar's playing 130 games next year. Same thing's true. Brendan Donovan, same thing. I cannot guarantee at all that any of the pitchers that you go out there and acquire via the trade market are going to start more than 15 games for you in 2023. I would rather keep the talent that I currently have in my lineup and just go pay the freight on the free agent market for the starting pitching that I'm looking for. Maybe they don't have the same upside 4 years from now that the trade player would, but I'm getting that production now, and man, that's all I can really do. I have no idea who the best starting pitchers are going to be in baseball 6 years from now. No clue. Half of them are probably not currently in the major leagues. So instead of worrying about which guy is the best upside 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, I'm looking at who can help me today. And for that, I'm going to go out and spend the money that is necessary to be able to get the guy that they're craving.
But why can't you do both? And this is where I think the Cardinals fall a little short with it, to where you can spend to get those top guys like the Nolas and the Snells and the Yamamotos and get those certainties for next season. but you can also make a trade of a big-time player to get some upside in your rotation, whether it is Wu or Miller or something like that. That's the one.
Here's my question. If you get okay from the ownership, we can spend $60 million this offseason. I'm fine with it. The ownership comes down and tells you that. And you say, okay, we can go out and get 2 front-end starters. We can sign 2 of that top-tier group, right? Yamamoto and Nola and Snell. 2 of those guys in that top-tier category. Or you can go out and sign one of them and then trade, as you're saying, for another and then sign another, like, 3rd starter, right? Which of those options do you prefer? Because I would rather just go sign the 2 top-end starters.
Can I take option C and sign the 2 starters and make a trade for that guy that could be a 4 or 5 of my rotation?
Potentially.
And see, that's what I want the Cardinals to do.
But now you don't have Nolan Gorman or Donovan or Nootbaar.
But it's only one of those guys.
Right.
And I have developed talent in my system on the offensive side. We talked about it yesterday. You being able to develop these complementary pieces. If I'm trading, and I'm not trading Gorman unless it's for a guy like Logan Gilbert, who hit 12 strikeouts, by the way, last night. Not so crazy now,
I don't think he's getting traded.
I don't think so either. And if he is, you are trading Nolan Gorman for him. That's the only scenario. I'm trading Gorman. But if Seattle is willing to listen about Wu or Miller for Donovan or Nootbaar, I would consider it, because hopefully I can find another Brendan Donovan in my system. Hopefully I can find another Lars Nootbaar or develop that.
I don't think you do.
What I suck at developing are pitchers that have the potential of Wu and Miller.
So I think you might have some of those guys coming. Like, it's possible Graceffo or TK Roby or Tink Hence, one of those 3 could become what you're talking about.
But if I get the guy from Seattle and I have to trade a piece away and 1 or 2 of those guys become it, you know what I can do? I can deal one of those guys to fill the other void.
Maybe, but it's really hard to get that starting everyday player. Like, getting that player is incredibly difficult to find, and developing an internal player at the cost that the Cardinals currently have as a left-handed bat that gets on base or hits for slugging the way that Donovan, Nootbaar, and Gorman do. Dude, the Cardinals haven't done that since Matt Carpenter. It's been a decade. So as good as they are at developing players that become like Tommy Edman, really solid but low on base and just solid everyday regulars, right? Dylan Carlson's, those types of players. They do a lot of those. They don't really develop Nootbaars, Donovans, and Gormans internally. And then I look at what is out there in terms of the other teams that you're competing with right now. I think it is easier to match the rotations from around the National League than it is to match their lineup if you give up talent from your lineup. The reason why I say that is because, dude, go look at that lineup in Philadelphia. Go look at the lineup in Atlanta right now, or the lineup that will probably exist in LA with the Dodgers next year. Those are that's Padres. Those are some really good lineups. Now go through those rotations and look at how many of them are going to be up for contracts in this upcoming season. I don't know what Philly's rotation is going to look like next year. No clue what the Dodgers are planning to do with their rotation. They got a whole lot of young guys that they're banking on. Guys, go look at the ERAs for those young pitchers right now. It's not all that impressive. Go look at what the Atlanta Braves have after Charlie Morton ends up either retiring or moving on. There are some real questions with depth of starting pitching for some of these teams. I think it's easier to match that than it is the position players. And if you trade from your depth, I do wonder if you end up losing a little bit of that in terms of the ability to match bat for bat. One other thing on this, Paul Goldschmidt's part of my concern. I am officially a little worried about the lack of power that we're seeing from Paul Goldschmidt, guys. And I think that is part of what's leading me to the, I don't know that I want to trade Nolan Gorman. I don't know that I want to be including him on any of these conversations, because I'm going to have to replace the production that you used to get power-wise from Goldie with Nolan Gorman's power in that 3-hole right now. Goldie had 15 home runs on July 1st. Since then, he has 3. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if this is something that is going to become a theme or if it's just like a one-off where he's had a really bad 2-month stretch, but Goldie is not hitting for any power at all. His current slugging percentage would be the lowest of his career, and it's by a decent-sized margin. So if Gorman's the guy the teams are calling you about, I don't know that I have a whole lot of interest in trading him right now.
So, part of me wondered if somebody would want a Paul Goldschmidt. I remember our Seattle Mariners guy that we had on, Falk, was it? Or Salk? Yep. We had him on, and he said, like, yeah, they would probably trade one of these pitchers for a Paul Goldschmidt. If that deal's in front of you, I think I might be more willing to consider it now that I'm starting to see this with Paul Goldschmidt.
I just want to have all of these guys. Yeah,
it's not a Cardinals move, but I would consider it.
Let me say this, and it's ridiculous. I understand. I would be more likely to move Goldie than Gorman this offseason. I think it makes more sense for the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah, I would do that.
To move on from Paul Goldschmidt than it does to move on from Gorman.
Especially because you have somebody who could play that position.
Gorman is cheaper.
Maybe.
He is younger. He is cost controlled. He has 40 home run power. And there is more upside. The projections 2, 3, 4 years from now, Gorman should at that point be a better hitter than Goldie is. And internally, you have Burleson, who can play first base, or Walker, who you project to potentially be a first baseman. I don't have a replacement for Gorman at that spot in my lineup, and I'm not sure that I want to play. I know everybody will crush me for this. Tommy Edman as an everyday second baseman, or Donovan as an everyday second baseman. Gorman's become good enough there that offensively he more than makes up for what he lacks defensively.
I'm with you.
I think what you say there is an interesting point, Alex. If that ended up becoming the thing that you have to do to get your starter, I understand how you get there. I, again, though, would rather just not hemorrhage my talent internally. Hold on to all of the position players that you have right now in terms of the studs, right? I'm talking Gorman, Donovan, Nootbaar. And then just go sign starters. Go sign 2 or 3 of them. Acquire your bullpen pieces by trading Carlson and O'Neill, and maybe you end up giving up on like Juan Yepes or stuff like. Those are the guys that you trade to go out there and get those cost-controlled relievers as well.
See, and the reason I'm okay with making the kind of trade is I don't think the offense takes a significant step back. I think you're right on, though, about Goldie and kind of the worry there, and that's why I agree. Though Gorman's name is in these conversations, he's only in these conversations if it is a Gilbert-type pitcher. I think Donovan, Nootbaar, they can belong in these conversations, though, because I do think there is something to the fact that the 2 of the prospects they acquired in these trades were quote-unquote Donovan-esque, is what the Cardinals would say. So I think they are exploring potentially moving Brendan Donovan and moving him for a controllable piece. And you said something, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you said you don't want to count on the Dodgers young guys, what they've done in their rotation. That's why I don't want to wait and see what Hintz and Roby are. I want guys that have already proven it at the big league level. And you also said a Phillies lineup or a Braves lineup, you can match that 1 for 1. Well, you know what shuts down those lineups in postseason play? Great
Logan
pitching.
Gilbert.
And that's why I would say, like,
it doesn't
I
always,
would take
though.
a lot of times it does. Like, I think a lot of the talk about these teams that win the World Series, yes, it is about their lineup. I think their pitching is a bigger part of that than it is their lineup, because they're able to shut down a Phillies lineup. The Astros are able to shut down the Yankees lineup at the time.
Go look at the Braves pitching that they had in 21? It's a good pitching, but not world beaters coming out of that rotation on a night-in,
but who got hot in that lineup for them? It wasn't necessarily their top. I mean, they didn't even have Acuna. I mean, they got lucky and got Rosario that got hot at the time, Peterson that got hot at the time. I just think I'm willing to take the risk, because unlike with pitching, these teams that have these pitch like Seattle, Miami, these teams that are holding on to all these pitching prospects. Look at what Houston did coming into this year, where they let Verlander walk because they had pitching depth. Why'd they have to go acquire Verlander?
The truth is
their
you need
pitching
both.
depth disappeared.
The truth is you need both.
But I think the Cardinals have plenty of offensive depth that they can push one piece out and still feel good.
Agreed.
I don't think position depth dissipates as quickly as pitching depth does.
Here's where I should say. What you're going to get pitching-wise for Nootbaar, for Donovan, I think you're talking about Wu or Miller at the back end of the Mariners rotation. And again, I'm not even sure they're willing to trade any of these guys. Their general manager went on with MLB Network Radio prior to the deadline. This was a couple of days before, and said, this is our foundation. Why would we trade these guys? We're not going to do so. That could change.
Say that
in the
narrative
offseason,
changes.
they may say, you know what? We need a left-handed bat. This is how we get it. The same thing that the Cardinals are doing with the pitching side of things. I get all of that. But, go look at their numbers. Go look at what you can get out of Miller right now. Go look at what you could get out of Wu right now. It's not all that dissimilar from what you're getting internally, and it's definitely not as good as what you could get if you go to the market and get like a James Paxton or a Jordan Montgomery or like Sonny Gray. Those guys are all better than what I'm talking about with any of these back-end starters that you could get elsewhere, right? So if I could instead, you're telling me option A, I'm trading away Nootbaar or Donovan or Gorman, and I'm getting one of those back-end starters for the Mariners. Option B, I'm trading Carlson, and I'm getting back a Clark Schmidt. I'm going option B every single time, because it's still a solid back-end starter with a little bit of upside remaining, but he's cost-controlled, cheap. I can plug him into my rotation tomorrow, and I feel pretty good about it. And then I'm going to get my top 2 starters via the free agent market. I think that what you're getting internally from Nootbaar, Donovan, Gorman is going to be better than the pitcher that you would be able to acquire by trading those guys. I think we are overestimating how good some of these pitchers are that are available via trade right now.
I think that's possible. I think that is possible where we overestimate it.
Gilbert is a different conversation. I also don't think Gilbert's being traded.
Yeah, agreed. I think you could be right to where it is like you make that trade, you look back on and go, man, we got a number 4 for Nootbaar who developed power.
And that should be the expectation.
But I think the way that you look at it, if you're the Cardinals, and this is how I would view it, and I would look at it and go, yeah, I agree. I think they probably should target their top 2 guys via free agency. But I'm not writing off the idea of not moving a Brendan Donovan after we get that.
Agreed.
Because I would look at it and go, sure, we acquire a guy that's a 3 now, but if we project his stuff to play up as a 2, we've got a cost-controllable 2 that we're not paying $25 million.
Fives right now. That's what I'm saying is like.
But I would much rather have the upside.
Don't you need a 5 next year with an upside of potentially getting to a 2?
Sure. But we don't have any inclination that they're going to get there next year. Like Brian Wu this season, tell me how you would feel if this was somebody that next year you had in your rotation every single day. He's averaged 5 innings per start and has a 4.75 ERA. He's 13% below league average as a pitcher. Bryce Miller, 16 starts, averaging about 5 innings per start. 4.2 ERA, has been 2% below league average as a pitcher so far this season. My guy Schmidt, who everybody makes fun of, says that guy is no good, he's too old, he's not a good pitcher. My guy Clark Schmidt, right? I heard the fast lane. I heard you, Anthony Stalter.
You have mailed it in.
23 starts this year, 115 innings, 4.2 ERA, exactly league average. Clark Schmidt has been a better pitcher this season than either Bryce Miller or Brian Wu. Will be cheaper to acquire. Could have exactly the same amount of success next year, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. And could project to be pretty solid moving forward as well. Cost controlled, cheap, all of that stuff. I'll get that guy. He's easier to acquire. I don't have to give up my internal homegrown talent either.
Quit trying to make Clark Schmidt work, man.
I'm not even like, set aside him specifically. I think that we are overestimating how good Wu and Miller are because they've become the sexy, hot new names that are out there as on the market. I think you can go to the free agency market, spend $10 million for a starter for that exact same spot, and expect better returns on your investment.
I guess it comes down to what exactly are you looking for that spot? Because I think
if that's what the standard is, then you can get that 2 years from now from one of the guys that's internal.
Maybe, but again, I think that's where the Dodgers are falling. Where it is where you look at the Dodgers, you go, they haven't proven at the big league. We get up here and we go, ooh, no, not it. I think that's the chance you run into with a hint. I'm not saying hints.
That might happen with these guys too. They might suck next year.
They've proven that they can do it here at the big league level.
No, they haven't. Not at a high level.
I mean, that 4.2 ERA I would take as a 4.
They're below average.
I would take Miller's numbers here in St. Louis.
I think it comes down to,
are you willing to do just a 1 year, 2 year stopgap and do that, or are you willing to say, all right, we think Miller can be a 4 next year for us, and maybe in year 2. Year 3, though, is he going to take that next step? And I think that's where you look at the projection. That's why I'm higher on like a Miller, where I would bring him in and I'd go, sure, maybe he ends up being a number 4 for me next year. But I know that his ceiling, if he can get there and take that step, is higher than Schmidt's and is high enough to where it's worth giving up the price that you're asking to do. And again, I just don't think you're losing much by trading a Donovan or a Nootbaar. I think your offense is deep enough, and you mentioned the Phillies. We've talked about the Phillies and their 5 core guys. Nootbaar and Donovan aren't in the top 5 of the Cardinals core. Not right now, they're not.
Yeah, they are.
It's Goldschmidt, Arenado, Contreras, Walker, Gorman. That's the top 5.
That'd be my top 5.
Yeah, I think that you could easily swap, like long-term, Goldie for one of those other 2 that you just mentioned, and they could be part of it. How did you feel about Jack Flaherty's season this year, Alex, for the Cardinals?
Underwhelming.
Would you be like, man, plug that into my rotation next year? I'm super excited about what that's going to be for the Cardinals.
The player, no. The numbers, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to trade for the production, Nootbaar or Donovan? How would you feel about that if that was your return on the investment for the trade?
I'm not trading
year?
for the numbers. I'm trading for the upside.
Sure, but just follow me here for a second. If you got the exact same production next year out of the pitcher that you trade for, and you got rid of Nootbaar or Donovan for Jack Flaherty's production this year, how do you feel?
I mean, for next year, underwhelming, but again, to me, it's not a conversation of just next year. It's a conversation of next year plus by trading that guy.
Sure. Yeah. And if
I think the upside's what Flaherty was when he came up originally as the Cardinals,
but it's not.
Then yeah, I'm willing to do that.
Can we just talk about it for next year though for a second? For next year, how would you feel about that return on your investment? You got rid of Nootbaar or Donovan, and in return, you got Jack Flaherty's season this year for the Cardinals. You feel how?
And if I spent in free agency, I'm assuming. spend on the top two guys.
Sure, however you want to play.
And I think
I'd be okay with it.
I'd be furious. Furious.
Be fine
If
with
my
it.
return on investment was I got Jack Flaherty's underwhelming season this year for one of Lars Nootbaar or Brendan Donovan, who get on base more than 37% of the time and have the potential to hit 15 or 20 home runs next year for me, I would be furious. Because I can go to the market and get that guy for $10 million every single season. I understand that you're trying to get the upside 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Guys, I'm not in the business of trying to get the upside right now. This team's trying to contend. I've got Nolan Arenado. I got Paul Goldschmidt. I'm trying to win a championship.
Yeah, but what did they do at the trade deadline? They said, well, we've got to go with a little bit more of a futuristic approach, which is why they acquired all these guys.
Right now. That's for the rest of this season. You're not going into the offseason thinking we're building for 2027. If you are, you should trade Goldie and Arenado. They're not doing that. So the reason why I bring up Jack Flaherty's numbers for this season, I can go to the market and get those exact same numbers by not trading away any of my internal options and instead by paying $5, $6, $7, $8 million bucks. You could do that on the free agent market. Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, we've made them into Cy Young and Tungsten Armo Doyle. They're not. They are perfectly fine major league caliber starters. It is every bit as likely next year that you see one of your internal options become those players as it is that those guys take the next step to becoming a 3 or a 2 starter. So,
that's where I would disagree. I don't think someone in the system can do that next year.
Can become next year what Bryce Miller or Brian Wu are this year?
I don't think they have an arm in the system that can be those guys.
Totally
Not right now.
I think you have one, but I don't think he's going to be available for a couple of years in Roby.
Roby could, Tink Hence could, Graceffo could. Those 3 guys are your options
I
right now.
forgot about Tink Hence.
Yeah, you've got
Tink Hence is still a
internal
couple of
options
years
that
away.
do have legitimate projection
And again,
right
to
now.
your point of like, we're not competing for 2027. I'm not competing for 2027. I'm focused on 24, but that's what my free agent signings are for. I'm bringing in a 4 that I think has upside too, potentially. And I think that Miller has higher upside than what a Graceffo has. Roby, I don't know because we haven't seen him in this system.
Why do
Because
we
I've
feel
seen him
that
have
way?
success in the major leagues. Graceffo, I think, could be another one of those overhyped Cardinals prospects. Everything I read on Graceffo says, yeah, he's good, but calm down your expectations.
I feel the same way about Bryce Miller. Why do we suddenly think that Bryce Miller is such a stud? Like, where did this come from?
He's the place filler right now, but he's done it at the big league level. His numbers are good right now.
Than Gordon Graceffo was.
I mean, but Nootbaar wasn't a prospect, and we look at him as a franchise pillar.
Sure, they can change the outlook, but like...
Yeah, and I think I think Miller is working on that. I mean, if he has good stuff, which is what we hear, Miller has good stuff, and he's a guy that's a number 4 right now, that's where, again, like, sure, maybe he's a 3 next year, but that's where you start to look at the
next year.
dream of Bryce Miller.
He's been a below-average starter, dude.
In his rookie year.
Yeah.
But with great stuff.
Good stuff. Let's not overstate it. It's been good stuff, and we suddenly think that he's Cy. I think he's a pretty good starter. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to have him on this team. I'm not trading one of my stalwarts. Coming up next, Alex has a junk drawer story here on 101 ESPN.
from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Me and T-Bone are about to come to blows, but you don't need to worry about that because Alex has a story for you today that's going to bring all of our spirits up. Alex, what happened yesterday?
So people know me as somebody who minds his own business, right? Like I put headphones on. I don't like to talk. It's just how things go. Well, I almost got into a fisticuffs moment yesterday when I was out shopping.
On our show?
No, not on our show. Not on our show. It was actually, and I'm going to be the good guy in this scenario. You all are going to agree with me here. So I had to do some running around yesterday before my wife had to go to work. Went to the grocery store. I had to go to the hardware store to pick up a couple of things. Get to the hardware store, and I'm waiting in line to check out. There's a little bit of a line. And so I'm sitting there. Don't have my headphones in. Forgot those. That's fine. While I'm standing in line waiting for this to go, you could tell that there was a new cash register lady that was working, and she was struggling. It was taking a while. The guy that was up there with her was getting frustrated. She looked very anxious because she could tell he was frustrated. Regardless, it took a while. Either the register wasn't working, something was wrong with the guy's card. So she just told him, "Sir, we're having some type of issues. You have another way to pay." And, you know, this guy gets frustrated. He's like, "Oh God, of course." She's like, "Sorry about that." And so then he gets hostile with it. And that's when my ears perk up. Like when you start getting hostile with customer service, like, come on. But again, I like to mind my own business. So anyway, this guy's like,
I can see where this is going.
This guy's like, "I'm not going to, this is my card. I either do the card or I'm walking out with this stuff." And she says, "We can't do that, sir. We need some type of payment, blah, blah, blah." Then he drops the B word. Calls her a female dog and says it to her face.
Okay.
He says,
"Never mind, I changed my mind. You are the good person here."
He says, "Look, lady, you don't have to be such a..."
Yeah.
And that's when I stopped immediately. And I go, "Dude, you don't have to call her that. Apologize to her." And, like, that's not who I am. I'm not the type of person that tells somebody to apologize. But, like, I don't appreciate it, especially when you use that word.
Sure.
He told her, he looked at me and he goes, "I'm not going to apologize. She's acting like one." And I go, "Dude, just pay the money, apologize to the girl, and leave." He goes, "You want to take this outside?" Which is, like, the worst phrase you could say to somebody is, "Oh, you want to take this outside?" I'm like, "No, dude, I'm not going to take this outside. Apologize to the girl and leave." He's like, "I'm not apologizing." And then he called me the F-bomb and walked out the door. And so I was in my head thinking, you know, and I got up there and I told her, I said, "Hey, sorry about that, blah, blah, blah." And so I'm cashing out. And so I'm thinking this guy's standing in the parking lot waiting for me. I'm like, man, I'm not getting into a fight right now. I got to get home. Luckily, he was in his car. Like, I thought he was going to get out and say something, but he just sat in his front seat. And I got in my car and I drove away. And I'm like, how can a human talk to another human like that and then look at the situation and think, I'm the one in the right here? And maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but like I said, when you start calling somebody that word,
yeah,
I got a problem with it.
I don't think you were in the wrong. I'm trying to think of what would have been the right way to handle that, though.
Yeah. And I think I lost control when I heard him call her that. And maybe this is like the dad in me now, because I'm thinking like that's my daughter in 16 years.
I was about to say, specifically girl dad.
And she gets called that, and I'm thinking, no bleeping way. Like, you don't call somebody that.
I don't think that you were in the wrong at all. I also wonder, like, if you're in her spot, like, imagine yourself in her situation.
Do you want somebody else to exacerbate the situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I should have found him after in the parking lot and say, like, "Hey, man."
That's really a bad idea.
No, definitely wouldn't have won that.
Because then you're not in a safe space at all.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I did make more of a scene out of it because there were other people around, but it's like, come on. Like,
if we know Alex at all, too, he got loud. His arms started flailing around.
No, I didn't do that. I kept it very monotone. I'm like, because I was standing behind him, and it's like,
all right, that part of the story I don't believe.
Dude, like, come on. But yeah, maybe I should have found a different way to handle it. But again,
I probably just wouldn't have said anything. I think you did the right thing. I probably wouldn't have said anything, and I would have just been like, "I'm sorry you had to deal with that."
5 years ago, Alex wouldn't have said anything. I would have had my headphones in and would have just looked at my phone and been like, what a you know what. But yeah, I think it was the girls that triggered me, because this girl had to have been like 22, 23 years old, and you could see the scared look on her face, and that's why I stepped in.
Not you, Alex. I want to be clear.
No, it was him.
People got to quit being jerks when they go out to the store.
And
like, people are, Everybody's just trying to get through their day, man. That's all it is. Everybody's just trying to get through their day. And if you're being a jerk and making it more difficult, like, come on, man.
And even if you want to be a jerk, because like some people just have to have that in the day, I don't think you got to get to the point where name calling jumps into that. Like, that's the level where you can be frustrated and just walk out, but you don't need to drop the B word.
See, I've had an issue. Like, I went into a hardware store and...
Did you not know what to do when you got in there?
That was my first issue.
Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong place.
So I've actually got two quick stories to add on here, both at a hardware store. One, went in, and you know how these places give you like the rebate gift card, right? It's like the prepaid gift card that they send you back in the mail. I don't know why they can't just do like a cash back type of a thing, but whatever. So you can't use it at half of the different places that you go to. I go to the hardware store. I try to use it. There's like 7 different ways that you can put your information in. We try all of them. It didn't work. What do you do then? I'll just use my credit card. It's fine. I'll use it a different time at a different place. That's all you got to do if you're that guy, right? Hey, it sucks. It is what it is. You get frustrated, I'm sure, but you move forward. Second story that I've got for you, same hardware store. This was last week. I didn't want to tell this on the air, but since you brought up going to a store. A little bit of sleep deprivation going on at home right now, right?
Been there.
So I go to the store, I go inside, get everything that I need, hunky-dory, whatever. I walk out, and Alex, you know the move, right? Hit the pocket.
Keys, phone, wallet. I didn't do that this morning.
So I did.
Left my phone at home.
Hit my pocket. Oh, bleep.
Nice.
Where's my keys? This is as I'm walking back to my car from being in the store for the last 20 minutes. I'm thinking, I'm like, did I take them out while I was in the store? What did I do with my keys? And then it hits me. I left them in the ignition, turned on while I was in the department store.
I've never done that. I
haven't either. This is the first time I've ever done it. Ever.
I've left them in the car. I've never on.
Alex, I went dead sprint. I've got the cart in front of me, and I am just sprinting on to my car. I'm like, oh no, I've like invited somebody to steal my car at this
pretty
point.
much. You left the doors unlocked too?
Yeah, well, my car's on.
Oh my God.
So I guess I just was so out of it, I didn't even think to turn the car off or like.
And yours is the turn, right? Yours isn't the button?
Nope.
See, I can understand the button thing, not the turn.
Yeah.
I left the ignition turned on. I pulled in Alex, I'll be honest. I had my headphones on. Walked into the store, got distracted by a podcast that I was listening. It was probably the Fast Lane. I was getting fired up about something.
They called you
saying.
A little kid?
You are changing.
I have never been more embarrassed.
You're becoming Ferrario, and it's a little disturbing to watch.
Man, it just gets worse from there. Like, I forget stuff all the time now. It's it's how life goes with us.
Forgot his damn phone today.
Yeah.
Dude, I told my wife that the other day because I couldn't tell her when I got home. I didn't have the heart to do it.
Didn't you just stress her out more?
Exactly. She was like, you are an idiot. I was like, you're correct. Yeah. Coming up next, how is the college football playoff going to work out now that the Pac-12 is imploding? We've got some thoughts here on 101 ESPN.
101 has your...
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. She truly is the best. Her team is the best at Allstate when it comes to your insurance coverage. Why? Because they always keep you in the loop. There's one thing that would get more frustrating than anything is when you have your insurance for your car or your home and you don't know what the money is going to. Let's say something happens to your house, something happens to your car, and you find out that it's not underneath that umbrella because your agent didn't communicate that to you. That's not what Tracy Bibb and her team are about. They're always on top of what your coverage is and what is under underneath that umbrella. And when something changes, when prices increase, when certain things are on or off that insurance coverage, she's contacting you to let you know about all that. She cares about that customer service, which is so crucial when it comes to your car and home insurance. So give Tracy a phone call today. Ask her about a free non-committal quote. She will give you all the information. Tell her you heard me talk about it here on 101 ESPN, and Tracy will convince you from there. 314-352-4494. Give her a call today. Tracy Bibb, 314-352-4494. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Auto Centers Nissan, home of the lifetime warranty and 30-day return. This is exactly where you want to be listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Football is in a state of flux right now, to say the least. The Pac-12 is imploding, and this is going to have some serious long-term effects on what the college football playoff is going to look like. Yesterday, the commissioner of the SEC, Alex, went on the Paul Feinbaum show and basically said, yeah, we're going to have to look into that. In other words, yeah, the Pac-12 ain't going to have a guaranteed spot in that anymore because the Pac-12 no longer exists in the format that it did when this was first put together.
What if, hear me out here, they combine with the Mountain West?
Yeah, well, there is no longer a Power 5. There's Power 4. Big 12, the ACC, the Big 10, and the SEC. And if we're being totally honest, to T-Bone's point, it's a Power 2 with two others that are kind of in the conversation.
The ACC will be gone sooner or later.
Guys, we're about a year and a half away from the 12-team playoff that they expanded to. When that takes place, and we no longer have the Pac-12 as a part of it, how do you think they should go about getting to those 12 teams? What do you think it's going to look like? How do we put this thing together at that point?
I think you know where the money is and you know where the quote-unquote talent is, and I think you're talking about 4 from the Big 2 and 1 from our, make sure math works correctly, 2 from the other ones. If you're going 12, I mean, unless you really want to go 5-5 and then 1-1, but I feel like you got to at least have a little bit more jockeying for positioning in the other 2 conferences with the ACC and the Pac.
I don't even know if you got to give them that much credit. I think it's 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big 10, no conference championship in those leagues, by the way. And then you go 1 from the Big 12, or the Big 16, whatever they're at, and 1 from the ACC, have a conference championship game that determines who wins those conferences and gets that automatic bid.
So basically it would be you're essentially having at that point a 16-team playoff with the qualifier coming from the Big 12 and the ACC.
Yeah, and then you've got 1 non-power 4, which they're doing next year too, by the way. Like a Coastal Carolina, I think would have gotten in last year, the highest ranked top 25 team. And then you have 1 quote unquote wild card, which could come from the Big 12 or from the ACC. If, like, for example, Clemson loses to California in the ACC championship game.
Clemson
and
losing
you look
to
at Clemson
California?
and you go, that was just a one-off for them. They belong in the playoff. They're better than the 5th best team from the Big Ten.
Similar
and
to
the
what we've
SEC.
seen in the 4-team playoff with like Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah, like last year, who was it that lost? USC lost in their conference championship game. Maybe they end up getting in, or they'd be in the Big Ten. But anyways, you understand the idea.
I'm already confused.
Okay, they lost in the Pac-12 championship game this past year. There was an argument to be had. Even though they lost that Pac-12 championship, they should have been in the playoff because they had to play an extra game. Probably shouldn't have to. Either way, I digress. I think that's the way you go about it. I think you should have the big power brokers because I don't think there's a power 4. I think it's a power 2 with like 2 kids that get to tag along for a free dinner. Kind of my role. Where it is 4 teams from those 2 conferences. There's 8, 2 winners from the other small 2. That is 10. 1 non-power 4. That's 11. 1 wild card 12. There's the college football.
I think
playoff.
something like that is exactly what's going to end up happening. I think that you're going to see the Big Ten and the SEC say, us having a conference championship game is actually hurting us.
Yeah.
There's no reason to do it. Why don't we tie in the college football playoff to our championship games? I could see them doing like a 4 teams from the Big Ten, 4 teams from the SEC, and whittling it down to the final 2 as like the first round, quote unquote, of the playoff. And then you just reseed from there. So the Big 12 championship game is 1 feeder into the playoff. The ACC championship game is another feeder into the playoff. The winner of those 2 games, so 2 teams total, would end up getting into the postseason, the CFP. And you have the same thing is true for 4 teams coming out of each of the Big Ten and the SEC, so 8 total. I think you just end up making basically the conference championship games as the first round of the playoff. And those teams that are coming out of like the wild card team or the, I guess you would use it as the non-power 4 in this scenario team, they're automatic qualifiers. They skip the conference championship potentially. Or you use them as the conference championship round and whatever remains afterwards, they're the teams that get in. So I think that they can find a way to get this. It's just going to take a lot of creativity. And I will be very curious to see how much of their power the Big Ten and the SEC end up exerting. Because the number one thing that's going to come out of this is more representation from both of those respective conferences. So if you're an Illinois fan or you're a Mizzou fan, this is actually really good for you. Because now you have a better chance of being able to make it into the college football playoff games that matter. If you're Illinois, you could have potentially been close to this last year in this scenario. Last year, you would have been in a spot where if you had beaten Michigan, you might have been one of those 4 teams coming out of the Big Ten into a college football playoff setting.
Even if you abandon the divisions?
Well, I mean, that throws another wrench in it. But,
I think that's where they're going.
I'm talking about from last year's structure. Based on the way that they were playing and everything, they would have been, what, at 9-3 at that point? And they would have had a win over a nationally ranked top 5 team in Michigan.
Yeah.
They might have been one of the teams that ended up qualifying in that scenario for the top 4 teams in the Big Ten to whittle it down into the teams that were making it into the college football playoff.
I am already confused. Can't wait for this football season.
Coming up next, let's play a game of Worried or Whatever. We'll get into it next year on 101 ESPN.
From the opening drive.
count that big pen.
Let's play a quick game of worried or whatever. Here on 101 ESPN, alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Guys, let's start out with something I mentioned a little bit earlier. I'm starting to get to the place where I am worried about Paul Goldschmidt's power. He had 20 doubles and 15 home runs on July 15th. At that point, he had a slugging percentage of .500. So that's the first half of the season, 80 games for him. Since then, he has played 30 games. He has 2 doubles and 3 home runs. He is slugging now on the season .450. This would, if it continues, be the worst slugging percentage of his major league career. Guys, worried or whatever on Paul Goldschmidt's power outage?
I would say worried, because it's not just a power outage for a 28-year-old guy in back-to-back seasons. That could be an injury. It's a power outage for a 35, almost 36-year-old that you have for one more year and then is a free agent. And look, Paul Goldschmidt just doesn't lose talent, but I heard Van Slyke, I think it was, talking, maybe it was somebody else, talking about how the numbers with his fastball are dropping, of how he's catching up to the fastball.
Yeah, he's struggling against high velo.
And he said, well, that's the first sign of a dip in consistency and being able to catch up to pitches when you start missing the fastball. So if that's the case, I'm saying I'm worried.
I'm going to say whatever for right now, but I think by the end of the year it can really change. I think it is fair to have a slight worry about it. I want to see what he looks like the rest of the year before I hit the panic button. So I'm going to say whatever. He's earned the benefit of the doubt for that. So I'm going to wait till the end of the year. You asked me this question at the beginning of October. We'll see if my answer is different.
Worried or whatever. The biggest drop-off in defensive numbers from last year to this year on the Cardinals is Nolan Arenado.
Whatevs, man. It's cool. No, he's been better lately. I think it was a back injury that really hurt him early on. So I'm going to say whatever. I don't think the defense concern for Arenado is... It's fair, but it's not a legitimate concern. I think he's back at it.
I think I'm
next
right
year.
there with you. It's a little concerning for how long of a stretch that was. It's like a couple games you get, but then it's like,
how long
what's going
O'Neal
on?
was out with a back injury. They take a while.
Man, if that's the comps we're going with here, I'd be even more worried.
I mean, he played through it, unlike O'Neal.
I'm not worried at all. This is a whatever for me. I think that Nolan Arenado, you go into next year, and the expectation should be, that guy's one of the 2 to 3 favorites to win the National League's Gold Glove award at third base. I don't know why. That was a tough one. Yeah. So I'm not worried at all. That's a whatever. Guys, worried or whatever for Tyler O'Neill getting hurt again yesterday and having to be scratched prior to the game.
Whatever. It was expected. I was expecting. Now, the way that it happened is unfortunate. Like, why are we making circus act catches in BP?
Apparently, that's not even what hurt him. He was already hurt. Yeah. Now, what I would ask is, why were you able to do that pregame, and then you went into the manager's office after making those circus catches in left field at the Trop, and say to him, yeah, I can't go tonight.
Why are you doing that if you've already tweaked something? Go sit.
Fair.
Put some icy hot on it or something. So it's whatever. Cool. Thanks, Tyler. We'll see you in the offseason.
I'm worried because there's a chance he's back in this outfield next year. So I'm going to hit the worried button on Tyler O, even though I know it can happen. This is like typical O'Neal.
Worried he's back. It's good.
Oh, thanks. I didn't even know I did that.
I'm worried for the Cardinals because of what T-Bone just said. I said earlier today, I am out. I am done. I have cut all ties with Tyler O'Neill. If I start to go back in, you guys have full permission from me to slap me in the face.
Oh, man, I'm going to make it a bad one, too.
So yesterday made me worried about O'Neill because of the Cardinals, knowing who they are and how much they struggle to let go of stuff like this. So that makes me worried.
Do like Elsa saying, let it go.
Guys, worried or whatever, Scott Perunovich hasn't had a full season of being 100% healthy in like 5 years.
I'm going to say whatever with this, not in the same tone of Tyler O'Neill being injured. Like, yeah, whatever was expected. I'm going to say whatever with this is, I think he's still trying to figure it out. But when he figures it out, and we saw that sustained run in that year that they made at least some noise in the playoffs when he had the power play, I think if he can figure out how to handle the NHL workload of forechecking and finding out the proper ways to go into the boards without setting yourself up for injury, I still think he can be a usable defenseman in your top 4, specifically on the offensive side. So I'm going to say whatever because I'm optimistic about him.
I'm saying whatever and it's more so because they're not going into the year with expectations for him. I think if Krug would have accepted that trade to Philly, and it was like obvious of like, oh boy, Pernovich is going to have to be on the number one power play, he's going to be filling that role, then I'd be worried. But I don't know what realistic expectations are for him this year. I don't think he cracks the top 6. I don't think he's in the lineup on opening night.
I think he's in the AHL on opening night. I think he's in the AHL.
So with that being the case, it's whatever. He gets hurt again. The Blues know they can't rely on him. I mean, I think they already know they can't rely on him until it's proven otherwise. But I think it's whatever. If he had a role like Neighbors had last year going into the year, and Neighbors had the same injury issues as him, yeah, I'd be saying something much differently on this radio today.
Whatever.
Oh, you got the Tyler O'Neill feel, huh?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, we really are switching roles. This is like the evolution of a butterfly. Like, we're going away from that caterpillar that's BK's optimism to mine.
BK's about to be
now.
No, I'm about to be that cocoon.
You guys ask me,
no, we need to go in
worried or whatever. The Blues have the exact same defensive core going into this season as we had last year. Little bit worried. What's the statement from The Office? I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious.
Yep.
I'm not super worried, but I'm a little worried about the fact that it's the exact same core going back this year.
Yep.
Now, I think the forwards are going to help. I think you're going to be better defensively from your forwards this year than you were last year. But yeah, the defensive core does worry me a little bit. I think Pernovich's injury does play into that.
I think having Marco Scandella healthy, at least, if he does make it healthy. Hey, the penalty kill was good when they had him.
I'm glad we had the same reaction, BK.
No, I'm actually a little optimistic on that side of it.
I am
Look
not.
at his numbers.
I'm already not looking forward to Alex.
You better
Blues
get
guy.
ready for it. You better get ready for it.
Oh, how I missed you. Coming up
They've only
next,
given
Chris
up 4
Kerber.
goals
He's the
today.
voice of the Blues here on
He'll agree
101.
with me.
ESPN. Hey, it's BK, and I've got some exciting news for all the men out there. Victory Men's Health has launched a new telehealth site. It's going to help you out get that ED medication that you've been looking for. It's called VictoryRx.com. Write that down somewhere right now. VictoryRx.com. They've made this process so easy. Men, you can go to the site, you'll get prescribed that ED medication, and you don't have to go through 17 different portals, put the same information in a bunch of different ways. No. It's all done via text now over at VictoryRx.com. You've probably heard of Victory Men's Health. They've been treating thousands of men in their standalone locations across the area, and now they are giving you easier access to that #1 selling ED medication. Their biggest sell, it's very simple. It's a chewable tablet as opposed to that swallowable pill. The pill that you have been taking previously, it can be impacted by the food or the drink that you end up having that day, not with the chewable tablet. It's got the active ingredients from both Viagra and Cialis, so it's going to work with the first dosage. Go to VictoryRx.com. That's VictoryRx.com to play hard.
Tanner Hendrickson here with the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fall to the Tampa Bay Rays last night 4-2. They are back in action tonight. 5:40 will be first pitch as Dakota Hudson's on the mound for St. Louis. And it'll be a bullpen game for the Tampa Bay Rays. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffAutoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues. He's joining us as he does each and every week here on the show. Kerbs, how you doing today, man?
BK, I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing very well. Kerb, so I want to ask you about the conversation we had earlier today on the Blues. There was a piece in ESPN.com about the NHL's offseason stock watch, and they had each team and their stock was either up or down compared to where it was a year ago. For the Blues, they had them as a team that is stock down compared to this time last year. So my question for you, Kerbs, would you say that this roster going into opening night is better today, or was it better at this point last year?
Oh, I'm going to have to kind of agree with them and say I think it was better last year. I mean, when you're talking about having Barbashev, O'Reilly, and Tarasenko on your roster at the opening day last year, absolutely, that's to me, I think it was a better roster. It was a deeper roster. So, that's the challenge I think that the Blues have this year. Now, look, it didn't pan out. Things didn't quite go well, and they couldn't they just couldn't stop the snowball from going down the wrong side of the mountain. But from an actual, just in my opinion, pure talent standpoint, depth and proven NHL talent, yeah, I got to think that last year's opening roster is better than where they are right now.
Kerbs, do you think the center depth, though, going into this season is better than what it was last year? Obviously, you don't have O'Reilly and Barbashev, but knowing that you have guys you feel comfortable with on the third and fourth lines, do you think that's at least a positive?
No, well, you're asking, Alex, the thing is you're asking a couple different questions there. Like, no, I don't think your center depth is as good as it was last year. It may prove to be okay, but it's just when I'm looking at Ryan O'Reilly and I'm looking at one of the best two-way centermen in the National Hockey League, and then I know what Ivan Barbashev can do at center as well. You might be okay, but it's not as proven to me down the middle. Robert Thomas took some big steps forward, but Robert Thomas did not show last year that he's a number one center in the National Hockey League yet. I think it's a huge summer, a huge camp for him, and I think he's got the right attitude. I think he's had the right work ethic this summer. I think everything is trending in the right direction for Robert Thomas. I don't think he was at Ryan O'Reilly's level yet. Braden Shen is Braden Shen. We know what you have. That's a positive there. Oscar Sundqvist at center. Yep. Okay. There's some positives there, getting him back and all that. But to me, this is just going to be one of those seasons of we've talked about it. I keep going back to that, to the joke of that we had with Randy and Carey about, kind of about potential and opportunity here. But
been telling Tanner about potential all day long, Kerbs. I've had enough of that P word.
Coming from the guy who falls for spring training every year.
I hate both of you.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Tanner. I understand. No, listen, but we were joking with Randy and Carey. We called it. I said, well, it just depends on on a lot of hope, right? And so we called it high on hopium, and to me, the high on hopium part is, you've got a lot of pieces that could work out really well, but you're asking guys to really be consistent where maybe they haven't been. Kapanen has not been consistent enough for a whole year. Verana, something to prove, has the skill, absolutely. Can he do it for a whole year? Can they do it when the pressure's on? Guys that look good for the last 20 games of the regular season last year, that doesn't tell me much. That can be some fool's gold because there's no pressure of having to make a playoff spot and all that. So, look, I like some of the pieces. I think there's the potential for the Blues to catch some fire and do some good things. But a lot has to come together, and especially just as a team. And that's where this whole thing will start is, do you start to see this group be a team early on? And if they are, then I think you're going to like some of what you're seeing. But it's hard for me to project when to be a really good team, to be a really good team, you're going to have guys be consistent in ways that many of them have not recently, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's a downer or not, but it's a reality.
It does. And one more follow-up on that, Curbs, because I mentioned this earlier. I do think a factor that comes into this also is the off-ice side, to where you had 3 guys who didn't have contract extensions that were worried about what their future looked like, compared to the amount of guys that the Blues have this year that don't have contract extensions but are trying to raise their stock going into free agency.
Yeah, that is I think that's a terrific storyline to watch here, is how motivated are some of these guys to have contract years, knowing that they're not only going to be free agents, but a lot of them unrestricted free agents. So they're in a situation where they can completely control their destiny and put themselves into signing a pretty good contract. And I think that that's part of the gamble, part of the hopium of this year is that a motivating factor where you see the next level from some guys? And we'll just have to wait and see. Look, Doug Armstrong knew when he made the changes and made the moves he made, he knew he was turning the page and creating a new core. He knows that the up-and-comers, what does a Zach Dean do? Can a Bolduc have a good first-year pro in the minors? How does Jake Neighbors take the step this year? The next step for Thomas and Kyrou, and your batting time as you're waiting for Snuggerud. This is part of a process. But to me, the process doesn't mean it has to be. We don't have to do the Coyotes. We don't have to do the process where you just fail to get high draft picks that'll impact you 6 years from now. This team can be competitive, and I do think that being competitive is a huge part of the continued development of the young guys. And I think that's why Doug has put the roster the way he has. I don't think he's built a roster that he says, I think we're a championship caliber team. But I think he's built a roster that said, if guys do their jobs, we'll be competitive. And I don't want a losing culture creeping in here. So I think that's the purpose.
Chris Kerber is the voice of the Blues. He joins us each and every Wednesday at 1:30 here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, I did want to ask you a Cardinals question, get in on a conversation, really an argument that me and T-Bone had earlier today. Kerbs, would you rather build around young pitching or young position players, just theoretically speaking?
I'd rather build around young pitching.
Crazy. You're wrong. You have the right to be wrong.
What's being wrong taste like, BK? Not too good.
You like it when that pitching breaks, Kerbs? You enjoy that?
Well, look, guys, in this current scenario, they build around young position players, and they seem to think that every single position player can play all over the field. Drives me a little bit batty here.
I didn't say that you've got a bunch of guys that can't play defense. I just said young position players. Again, it's a theoretical question.
The point is, the only way to get established pitching is it had to be young pitching. Right? If I've got young pitchers that can be good and I can grow and I've got some term, that's great, because I don't care what anybody says. Come playoff time, pitching wins over hitting.
You and T-Bone.
Taste it, BK. Just taste being wrong there.
Yeah, well, they can die on that fine. That's fine.
Kerbs, before
I got your back, T-Bone. I got your back, brother.
Thanks, Kerbs.
Somebody does. Kerbs, before we let you go, I know there's a pretty cool event coming up at OB Clark's, the best hockey bar in St. Louis.
Yeah, you know what? Tomorrow night, I'm asking a lot of people to just pop on by, have some dinner and a beer tomorrow night at OB Clark's. Every year they do a small fundraiser for the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. Joe O'Brien's son dealt with juvenile diabetes. We know that we've had some former Blues like B.J. Crombeen, that have dealt with it and stuff. So they do a terrific fundraiser, and you go in there, you have a beer, check out the raffle items, buy a ticket, put it in there, stuff like 4 tickets to the game and a period up in the broadcast booth, merchandise, memorabilia, and all. So tomorrow night, from 6 to 9, go on over to OB Clark's, stop in, have a beer, have a pizza, and help us raise some money for juvenile diabetes tomorrow night.
Kerbs, I'll Venmo you after this conversation right now. I'll buy somebody a beer. So if you go over there, you tell Kerbs that you've got the beer that's on BK. I'll get a couple of beers on me. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today.
You got it, guys. Have an awesome week.
See you, Kerber. That's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every week.
I'll do that with you, buddy.
BK and Ferrario.
I'm going to send him a Venmo so you could buy beers on BK and Ferrario, not Tanner.
If you are one of the first people that show up tomorrow night to the event at OB Clark's, you go up to Chris Kerber, you tell him, hey, BK and Ferrario sent me. If you're one of the first people and he's still got money that's available, it'll be on me.
Kerbs is going to be
Ferrario.
like, they never sent me money, and he's just going to pocket it.
Coming up next, we'll let the BK and Ferrario rewind, maybe yell some more here on 101 ESPN. Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Our conversation about the Mariners pitchers has just carried through the breaks over the last few segments.
You were a jerk.
I was.
I should have.
When I'm right, I'm right, though, you know?
On YouTube.
Boy, do I know that life. Hot damn.
On YouTube, I should have just had our Cam 5 up and on us during breaks. They would have seen some heated conversations.
People want.
They wouldn't have heard them, but they would have seen
them. People want the MLB trade deadline roundup back, so we just need to have our high noon duels. We've had 2 days this week out of the 3 where we've gotten into arguments over something.
If you are somebody that thinks that your company would be a good fit for a high noon duel daily here on BK and Ferrario,
contact us.
Yeah, go over to 101ESPN.com and find the contacts for our sales team. And go ahead and send them a message.
Send us a mic drop. We'll find it, and we'll play it, and we'll find out who you are. And we will put you a part of our high noon roundup. Yeah!
Or just send me a DM on Twitter, and we can go ahead and go that way.
Slide into the DMs, like Tyler O'Neill.
At T-Bone 101 ESPN.
Oh, wait, we can't do that anymore. I forgot. They removed the ability to do that now on Twitter.
There's no more DMs?
Well, you can't DM unless you're, like, verified and whatever. You got to pay for all that stuff.
And people can't DM Tanner because his is, like, blocked from security.
I'll read BK's phone number on here.
Yeah, give it to us. 314.
It's not even starting with that.
No.
You started with the wrong.
I don't even know what your number is. There's only 2 people in this world I know whose phone number. Like I could read it to you.
Am I one of them?
Hell no.
Earlier today, how many people could you actually do that for? I could do my wife.
I could do my wife and my parents,
I think, and my sister.
I can't do my sister.
Really?
Yeah, I can't. Well, she just moved to Illinois, so it's switched on me now. I could do my wife and my parents.
T-Bone, you're a little younger. Did you have a home phone growing up?
Oh my God, I was just going to say, I could name my phone number.
The funny thing is I think I could only do 2, and one of them was the old home phone number. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I was going to say, ours isn't
so I could probably do just one.
Yep.
It's crazy how that happens,
Dad.
isn't it?
Rotary phones were the best.
They always said, hey, you can't use your calculator during the math test. You're not always going to have that. Now I have my math. Now I have my calculator on my phone. You need to memorize all your numbers. You're not always going to have them with you. They're right here at all times.
You need geometry. The hell out of here.
Dude, that was my worst. My worst subject was geometry.
I failed geometry.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Why is that interesting?
If he was good at geometry, we'd have more swing and miss than rotation.
Yeah, exactly.
He quit pitching to contact.
That's why I'm not in the front office anywhere.
Clark Schmidt.
On Twitter, I put out a poll. Philosophically speaking, it's a question that I asked Kerbs just a moment ago.
Philosophically, meaning I need to prove Tanner wrong.
No, I'm actually genuinely curious. Votes. I mean, most people agree with T-Bone on this. I'm not saying either side is right or wrong. I'm just saying that I'm right. Would you rather build around cost-controlled young pitchers or cost-controlled young position players? I've always believed, Alex, the thing that the Cubs did correct was they built around young position players.
How'd that work out for them?
It ended horribly because they completely punted on the team and like they decided, no, we want to get out of this thing, whatever. I think the thing that they did right, though, was they built around young position players and then they supplemented it with the stud veteran pitchers, right? Because you kind of know what you're getting if they stay healthy with the veteran pitchers. You never know what it's going to look like with the young starting pitching. You could bet on 10 young starters and like 2 of them end up working out. Typically, the position players are a little easier to project level to level in Major League Baseball. So, and they year to year stay more stable in terms of their overall performance. So I've always been on the side of the young position players. I will say this, though. The starting pitching has higher upside. The upside of building around pitching, like we've seen with the Mariners, the Mariners and the Marlins, and you look down at Tampa Bay, the team that the Cardinals are playing right now. Like
recently, they're kind of a bad example because they fell apart. Look at what the Mets did when they had Syndergaard, Harvey,
and that is a really good example of the risk of it.
Yeah.
Because it can fall apart like that.
But you
when
had
you
that
build around the young
run.
possible.
Let me ask you guys this, because the young position player core that I can think of off the top of my head, tell me if you've got a better one, the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, they've got a good crop of young position players. Sure. Who do you think is going to have a longer sustained success, the Mariners or the Reds?
So this is where it gets really difficult, is because it's not just one or the other. Like the Mariners also have some really good young position players.
But wouldn't that be the Cardinals' position?
Also have some really good young pitchers.
But wouldn't that be the same the Cardinals' positioning, like the Mariners, if they could just get those good young arms?
And that's why, like, it's never in a vacuum, right? Like the one team that actually builds around almost exclusively young pitching is the Guardians. Like, they have none of the position players.
That never works.
They've got pretty good defensive players all across the board. They can't hit, but they've got great starting pitching
Ramirez
every single year. And that's it.
With his bat in his arms.
So, well played. The Cardinals have a little bit of both, and they would be building around both. But just in a theoretical sense, I would tend to build around the position player side of things. So that's why I would be much less prone to trade from that group. And then I also looked up, like, I think we underestimate the value offensively of Donovan and Nootbaar to the Cardinals, and I think we overestimate the value of these young starting pitching that we're talking about from the market. Like, Brian Wu might be great. Bryce Miller might be great. The odds are much more likely, though, that they end up being number 4 or 5 starters long-term for you. They've got good stuff, but, man, you look at their ERAs, they've been below average so far this season. Maybe next year they have a 3.5 ERA, and we look at it and we say, whew, I got to start in game 2 of a World Series for the Cardinals. Or maybe they're not part of your playoff rotation. That is every bit as likely for them. So I would keep the position players.
Couldn't you do that same argument with the position players, though? Like Brendan Donovan having an incredible year back-to-back, but all of a sudden it just disappears?
It doesn't happen very often. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I'm pretty confident in the profile of those players. Like, could next year we come in and Brendan Donovan, instead of being on pace for 15 to 20 home runs, hits 10? And the power takes a step back? Totally possible. Do I think it's likely, though, that he has a 360-plus on-base percentage next year? Yeah. I would say that for Heat and for Lars Nootbaar.
I look at a roster.
That's stable.
I look at a roster and I say, you've got the pieces in place to have this offense great moving forward. If you pluck out a Donovan or a Nootbaar, what you don't have is the ability to go into next season and say, well, we didn't get our top guy that we wanted. We've got the next tier down, but we got 2 really good guys, but we don't want to trade from these guys, so we'll just go another tier down and add that to the rotation.
I agree with you, and that's why I say they just got to go to the top of the market and get those 2 starting pitchers. If they do that, the rest is kind of gravy to me, and where we differ, T-Bone, and I know that you're on the pitching side of things, and I get it. Like, there is a legitimate argument for it. You could pull out what you said. It's a Jenga board that is not going to topple over on the position player side of things. And then now I've inserted a lot more upside to my pitching staff by getting one of those young starters. I get the argument for it, and the Cardinals might end up doing it. I just think I'm starting to lean more towards that. I would keep my position players and pay for the pitching.
And maybe here's where I kind of, because I think you're right when you say that. Maybe keep the position players, pay for the pitching, because I agree they should spend on the top end of the market. But I think maybe it's because I've seen recency. And again, they've said they're changing the model. We'll see what changing the model looks like. But they haven't shown the willingness to spend on the top end of the market.
Yep.
And until they do that, then maybe my approach will change. If they spend on a Nola, Snell, Sonny Gray, maybe I'll look at it differently and start looking at it the way you are. But the way I view it is I'm just not 100% sure they can get either 1 or 2 guys. So why not be willing to pluck from something that you said won't topple over?
Earlier today, a former Major League Baseball general manager joined us on the show. It was Dan O'Dowd. He said that this player is going to be the Cardinals' future first baseman. Who did he say that was? If you got the correct answer at 314-399-9646, the Air Comfort Service text line, you are getting a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. Will be texter number 101 at 314-399-9646. Next week's Budweiser Bash game features a limited edition Gary Gaetti bobblehead. So get those texts in right now. Who, according to Dan O'Dowd, is the future Cardinals first baseman? The correct answer to that is getting the 4-pack of tickets. He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. If you missed anything from today's show, check it out on the podcast page. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Fastlane's coming up next. Can I say my piece now?
No, I'm going to let you finish. We got to hit a break, right?
We got to go to break, yeah. Coming up next.
Someone told me to squirt myself on that, and I frankly should have.